Good Monday morning. Welcome.
Welcome back.
Yeah, this is
Welcome home.
it seems like it had been a while since I had been in studio.
Mhm.
Been about a week?
Yeah,
I think a week.
yeah. You missed a few things. We had a
Uh,
blizzard. It got warm, and we're back.
yeah, so about that. Uh why was everything brown?
So all the dust from all these storms came in the air. So you had dirty rain, and then you had dirty everything else that was falling that morning. So the best part, I don't know if I would call it best, but the geek out, you look at my sunroof and you'd see the
Mhm.
snow caked on, and it was a layer of brown underneath. I was like, all right, car wash. 2 car washes, maybe.
So we were in Providence, following from afar. And when I was on the show, you guys were telling me what the storm was like. Get home, our travel party got back from Providence late Friday afternoon, and walking to my car, I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
I mean, it was just caked in brown, and I'm like, okay." The snow for the most part had melted,
Mhm.
but yes, it was a big car wash season. Then I get home and I noticed that on my patio, like everything is coated in brown. So I did.
Everything, even the ground.
So I did Google it. So this is New Mexico and Texas's fault.
Yeah, Mountain West Conference getting the act, and Texas Tech,
Now we need a nice little soaking rain to clean all of it.
a really good soaking rain, yes. But that won't be today. It's gonna be a gorgeous day. Glad to have you back. Sad all the teams, local teams are out.
We'll get into that plenty. It is Gary and Matt. There is Jimmy. Matt is out today. It is. So we make the transition, and this is what we do. And the sports were good this weekend, depending on how your bracket looked or who you rooted for, or if you're a fan of officials, coaches, or reviews.
Reviews.
Or
Oh,
if last night you learned what a gather step is in the Derek Queen game-winning shot for Maryland. That kid is a dude. He was a dude if you saw him play in Lincoln against Nebraska. Like you got to see him up close at the age of 19. The gather step, which I'm guessing a lot of people had no idea what that was. But if you've watched the NBA and you've watched LeBron James, you absolutely know what the gather step is.
they weren't calling that in any arena.
And they really haven't called it all year. I got some thoughts on that. I got a lot of thoughts on the weekend.
Man, what a tough shot, though. Tough way to lose for the Rams.
Yeah, I have a. It's like the part of sports. I'm going to get to this about the local teams being out and your fandom and your emotional tie, and you're just like the boom. Great friend of mine is a diehard Colorado State fan. He went to school there. He's got a Ram tattoo.
Nice.
His dad owns car dealerships up and down 25 from Denver up to Fort Collins. They've always been heavily invested in the athletic department there. They are all in on Colorado State. I know more about Colorado State because of Evan. Man, I woke up in the middle of the night and I almost had to call him because he sent me a text that I was worried about. Like he said, it's the worst loss I've ever been involved with.
He hadn't gone to sleep.
But it's part of March Madness. And this is the thing about like the season that just ended from me personally with Omaha men's basketball. And you can tell if it's a good season or not if you just go, hey, thank you. Like, thank you for taking me along on this ride. For everybody that followed along on Omaha's ride, it was an incredible journey. I mean, it was something that...
It was a dream.
Yeah, and I don't...
But it won't be the first time. I mean, it won't be the last time is what I mean.
Well, I hope not. I hope it doesn't take 9 years to get back there. It was just an unforgettable thrill that when you're in the middle of it, you probably don't fully... I'm not going to say appreciate, but you probably don't fully wrap your arms around and take everything in.
But you're working.
Yeah.
Game to game.
And that's what I was thinking about this weekend is there was so much going on in Providence. And it was a first time for Omaha being there and everything that was going on. And there were a lot more people that were around us than our usual core 27. But it was an unforgettable thrill to go on that ride and what it did to the athletic department and all of the people that made the trip out to Rhode Island with us. They got to experience that for the first time, and you get like a taste. Like if you're Creighton, you're used to it. Okay, if you're Omaha, that's the first time, and you immediately think when the game is over and you wake up Friday morning, all right, what do we got to do to get back there?
Yeah,
let's
do it again.
How do we repeat that? Because it grabbed the alums and it grabbed the university in a place that it's never done before. And here, it's bittersweet how Omaha lost that game. Okay, they could have been up 7-10 in the first half. They didn't hit shots. They did the two main things that they had to do against St. John's. And they're not built like Arkansas, which you saw a couple of days later, the way Arkansas is built with length and athleticism, and they out-Patinoed and they play volleyball on the glass. But they had a rebound, and they had to not turn the basketball over. They had 24 offensive rebounds, got out-rebounded 47-45, and they turned the ball over one last time. They just didn't hit shots in a make-or-miss league. And against St. John's, they turned the water off at the beginning of the second half.
That's exactly what I thought.
But if you hit shots in the first half, you're probably up 7-10. I'm going to tell you. They're up 7. I got people texting me going, "What is going on? This is great." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." If you're gonna pull off an upset, you got to get off to a good start, and then against St. John's, find a way to play 40 minutes of basketball and maintain it. So losing by 30 when the game got away, and St. John's started to clown Omaha, and it became a 2-15, and the crowd in the building was all St. John's. It's a little bit of a bittersweet taste to have it end like that.
Reminds me of my game at Stanford a few years ago.
Really?
Started out close. Second half, you're like, what happened?
Yeah. It's so in the moment, like you're like, okay, man, this is great. This is something that's never happened before. Me personally, I'm lucky enough to be involved with these guys that will be friends forever. And it was one of the most connected teams I've ever been a part. But then you wake up the next morning and you're like bittersweet, and you're like, God, there's something that says St. John's is not 30 points better than Omaha. But at the end of the day, it's a great season when you can just say thank you. Thank you to coaches. Thank you to the team. Thank you to players. Thank you for being you. Instead of, God, I can't wait for the season to be over and I just want to move on.
That was the game before.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what the thank you. Yeah.
But here's the thing about the NCAA tournament.
If you know, you know.
Whether it be men's or women's. And from whether it's Colorado State or late last night, if you stayed up, Arizona, Oregon delivered. I mean, Oregon's up 19-4 to begin that game in Seattle, and it's performing perfectly like Pac-12 after dark. And Arizona comes back. They grab the lead at halftime. Then it was back and forth. And Caleb Love is showing off. And now Caleb Love, he gets an opportunity to dance with Duke in the East Sweet 16. But that game delivered. So Arizona wins. And then you look at Saturday. So Creighton got off to a great first half, couldn't keep the momentum going once the second half started. And Auburn then started to impose their will, and you couldn't make threes. Jackson McAndrew didn't make threes in the second half.
Legs got heavy.
Yeah, you went from making 9 threes in the first half to only 3 in the second half. And Auburn finally looked a little bit like we think Auburn should look. I'm telling you, I was not super impressed by Auburn. It was there for the taking for Creighton, but there was too much of a run by Auburn that Creighton couldn't match. So that season ends, and what goes with it, with Ryan Kalkbrenner playing his 169th game, and one of the greatest defensive players in the history of college basketball will no longer be patrolling the lane. And then you have Stephen Ashworth and Jemiah Neal. Then you look at the Creighton women, who probably, I think, in the last 2 years underperformed. From 2 years ago, where they made the great run, to 5 seniors who combined for 97 wins, but it ended with a thud. Very much a disappointment in Austin, losing to Illinois like that. And then you have the Nebraska women that couldn't hold on to the basketball and couldn't find a way, once they got the lead against Louisville down in Fort Worth, to take it and be playing on to play TCU, who looks pretty good.
Yeah.
By the way, they're on to the Sweet 16. But the thing about the NCAA tournament and the thing about basketball and sports, and I don't know if you get this in football. I had this discussion with a friend of mine yesterday because we were talking about how March Madness creates like individual stories, like Amir Khan, the McNeese State, the manager, the aura.
The greatest day of his life Saturday.
Saw him up close. Man, he is a celebrity. They had so many people asking for pictures and autographs from him. And here's a manager that's got a 6-figure NIL deal. He's got his own jumpsuit. He's got all these other deals that are going on.
You and I went about it wrong when we were younger.
Oh, but yes, we did. Where would you like to start? There's a lot in there.
That's for the podcast.
But his Tick Picks deal that he got. Now, I think the best gift he got is that Will Wade's going to take him to North Carolina State as a GA. Because a lot of time managers in some programs, they're just like, hey, thanks for your 4 years. You're the most important person in our program. You work your butt off. But hey, thanks for the mems. There are coaches, though, that will help managers that want to coach. And Will Wade taking him to North Carolina State as a GA, I think, is the best story out of the Amir Khan. But March Madness creates like characters like that. They create stories. They create players that we've never heard of before, or the stories like Omaha in the trash can. Like, you don't get that in college football.
Mm-mm.
But I also wonder, and this is what I'm getting to, about the season ending around here. And there's one team left, the corner in the crown. They play next week. But it is,
I forgot about that.
well,
I really did. That's terrible.
Hey, there's going to be some guys that are jumping into the portal today because the portal is open that have forgotten about their team playing in the crown as well. Arizona State has lost a top player who has put his name into the portal. Yes, the portal is open today.
Oh, yeah.
Spring football starts today, and we have a couple of days off before the Sweet 16. But with college basketball, and I'll take this a little bit from my vantage point of being involved with Omaha men's basketball, and especially this year. And I'm sure Bishop would say the same thing. And both Creighton and Omaha had success. It's one hell of a grind. I mean, you're worn out. I'm not going to lie. It's Monday morning. The season for Omaha ended on Thursday. I am still worn out.
I know exactly what that means. People don't understand. It's an emotional and physical grind, but especially the emotional part. And if you're lucky enough to experience, especially what you did, it's a special worn out.
And it is. And and Bishop probably feels the same way because it's a grind. It's 5+ months. You're, as the radio guy, you're embedded with the team. And if you are on a really good team, they are very welcoming and you get to know everybody and you get to know their families.
Yep.
And so
they get to know you.
You get emotionally tied into it of, okay, what kind of a season are we having? And then you get on a run like Omaha and you're like, oh my God, this is magical. We've never done this before. But the one thing about the NCAA tournament, and there's only 16 teams left. We started with 68. We're down to 16. 7 are from the SEC. 3 conferences make up 15 of the 16 teams. You can say there's no Cinderella. Probably that's the case because the 2 lowest seeds both have a large war chest when it comes to NIL drink, which I think there should be an NIL drinking game every time that is brought up. But the thing about the beauty of March Madness, and it is beautiful. The only thing that's not beautiful about it is the Geico Pig commercial, which I've seen
You're out on the pig.
1,015 times in the last couple of days. Like all I've done basically Saturday and Sunday since we got back was move from my bed to the couch to watch 12 hours of basketball. But I'm sick of the pig. That's one of my negatives of the NCAA tournament. But the thing about the journey is you are grinding for 5+ months when you're keeping score. I mean, it's now student athletes. It's a year-round thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have very little off time. Like, for example, I'm sure most college basketball programs, their coaching staffs are out on the road recruiting, like they're the junior college tournament. They're recruiting in the portal. They're going to go to the Final Four next week. They're trying to fill holes on their roster. They're trying to fill holes on their staff. And before you know it, before school is out, in most places in May, they're going to come back and they'll start workouts. So it is nonstop. But when the season starts, it's 5+ months of a grind where it's every single day. And then you throw in 35 to 36 games. And this is the biggest part now being part of it with a extremely huge vested interest that sucks about the NCAA tournament is all of a sudden it's over. Like you build up to play in the NCAA tournament and all of a sudden it just ends like that. There is no like lead up to, okay, this is the end. It is so sudden in the NCAA tournament. And even like on TV, and I haven't, I haven't watched the Omaha coverage. I watched the Creighton game the other night.
You'll get goosebumps.
Is like your season ends, and either it ends on a buzzer beater where I can imagine in Fort Collins there was no productivity today.
Good thing they have good beer.
Or like Omaha or even Creighton, it was inevitable at the end. All right, the last couple of minutes you knew that the season was going to be over. But just the suddenness of the season being over, and like from the TV purpose, like your season is over and you're crushed. TV goes like to the studio show. Like it's just, and you're kind of like forgotten.
Yeah.
Like in March Madness, they just kind of move on.
We'll see you in one shiny moment. Bye, guys.
Exactly.
Omaha will be in it.
Tommy Ashworth and the kid that was sleeping at the Tennessee game the other day. We'll see you in one shining moment.
Yeah.
But it is the suddenness of your season just ends. Like there's the euphoria of the other side where you win a game, you keep playing, you win another game, You get to play in the next week, and then maybe you make it to San Antonio this year for the Final Four. But if you lose, regardless of round, it just is like that, and it's over. Like it's just done, and people like move on. I thought this as I was wrapping up on Thursday night is, like Omaha season is over, and I got emotional, but I was very thankful of the season. I mean, I didn't cry on air or anything like that.
No,
but you just I was very lucky this year.
You get reflective very quickly in that moment.
But while we're wrapping up the season, you're like, dang. Like my reaction to the end of our season was much different to the Clemson radio guys who we followed where they were sitting. Those guys, by the way, have about a 55-minute post-game show, and they wouldn't shut up. They just kept going. Even Brian Haney at KU was like, man, hey, I'm sorry, because you're supposed to sit there. And those guys were
This isn't Dabo.
Those guys were like, okay, season's over. Like even the KU guys, like Brian and Greg were like, okay, thank God this season is over. But as you're wrapping up the season and the suddenness of it all in the NCAA tournament, they're changing the floor in Providence. They're putting the second round thing on. They're changing banners. All right, people are leaving, and you're like, whoa.
Can we stay?
How are you not feeling the same way I am? So it's the beauty it's the beauty of March. No,
sir, it's 12:30. We want to get to bed.
Trust me, Omaha was such an afterthought in Providence, just because they were a 15 seed, and you had the life of that pod sucked out by Patino, Calipari, and Self. I get it. We were role players in it. We did our thing, but I don't know if I could. Maybe it's the beauty of March Madness, what it does, because that tournament is so big, and what it does to your inner workings is it's just bam, it's over. TV moves on, and they're talking about the next game, and you shuffle out of the building into the cold night, and that's your season after 5+ months of working to get to that point. Yeah. But wouldn't change it, would not change it at all. And I think anybody that makes it to the tournament, they wouldn't either. And when you don't make the tournament and you've been there, you feel it. You feel it. Because once you're there, you want to get back.
Yep.
And you want to figure out, okay, how do I get there? How does Omaha go from being a 15 to a 14? How does Creighton, which they're going to be in a transition mode without 11, is, okay, how do we get back? We know we got a really good shot to be back in the NCAA tournament. What do we have to do there? That's why you look at Nebraska's situation, okay? They got the taste last year, and the fan base got the taste.
This is fun.
And then it's taken away from you. And you're like, okay, are we going to get back there? It's just the beauty of March Madness. It's an incredible tournament that I know is going to undergo in the next 5 to 10 years major changes, where it's going to become more of a power conference. And listen, 15 of the 16 teams that are in the Sweet 16 are out of 3 conferences. That has a lot to do with conference consolidation. The mid-majors, we're just 2 years removed from a Final Four that had Florida Atlantic and San Diego State. So I'm not going to say a referendum this year. I think the tournament has played out like I thought it would. I thought it would be chalky. For those of you that went chalky with your bracket, you're probably doing pretty well. Yeah. For those of you that thought, okay, it never happens, we're going to pick upsets here and there, then your bracket probably is not very good. But the tournament, because we were so top-heavy, and there was such a gap between the 1 through 4 seeds in the KenPom to the 13-16, why are we surprised? Why are we surprised that we didn't have a multitude of upsets, or, like a 12 or a 13 darling that is playing in the Sweet 16? And also consider, this was one of the better mid-major groups that was in the NCAA tournament. It's just this basketball this year is top-heavy, and the teams at the top are really, really good. This is the SEC tournament. The bottom of the SEC gets a lot of love because the top is so good, but when they get on the stage, the middle to the bottom of the SEC that made the NCAA tournament,
it's not bad,
but they weren't great.
Yeah.
But 7 of the 16 spots belong to the SEC, and the SEC is very top-heavy with really, really good teams at the top. So that's kind of what the NCAA tournament is now that we make the move into a Sweet 16. But the suddenness of the season is over. Like Colorado State. Colorado State went through the euphoria yesterday of hitting a 3 with 6 seconds to go, thinking they're moving on, and Minnesota's going to have to wait on their head coach. 2, Derek Queen, doop, doop. And the ability to get the shot off, Colorado State also the ability not to foul on the play and for it to go in.
That's the only other thing you could do.
And your season is done. Like you don't like, okay, now we'll wait for the selection show. We should be in a good spot to get in the tournament. your season is done.
We're flying home in the morning, boys.
Yeah.
Get something to eat.
And
Toast to each other.
And you can be like Mick Cronin and complain about your travel, which in the NCAA, the travel...
Is Allegiant that bad?
Well, we
had an Allegiant flight 3 years ago. It was okay.
So, ironically, on, was it Tuesday? Tuesday, Omaha and Creighton flew out at about the same time on Sun Country. I think it depends on what part of the country you're in.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw an Allegiant plane. Allegiant as a standalone airline, I would not wish on my...
Okay.
Worst
I've never
enemy
flown
to fly
on
there. You know what? You might as well bring a folding chair.
Okay.
And it'll cost you at least $15 to put that folding chair down to sit in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But the NCAA in terms of travel, it is a crapshoot. Like you have, Omaha didn't find out what their travel plans were until 9:00 Monday night.
No pressure. You're just trying to pack.
Well,
you're trying to plan your life here.
Yeah, you had to send off. They have other things that are going on. But there's a lot of teams in college basketball because they travel really, really well. Their travel actually is probably worse. The type of airline and the accommodations are probably worse in the NCAA tournament than they are during the regular season. But I'm glad that Mick stuck with his bit the entire year and was complaining about travel all the way until late into the night on Saturday night.
Don't change. Yeah. We all have our roles to play.
All right, coming up on the show on Gary and Matt on a Monday after the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament, Evan Bland will join us coming up at 8:30. And then Jacob Bigelow stops by at 9. It is the start of spring football in Lincoln. The portal is open. Let's be honest, the portal for college basketball has been open for a while. We have coaching movement. The Big East suffered a loss yesterday, and it was not Greg McDermott, which every day that Greg McDermott is coaching at Creighton, you should bow down to the ground and tap and say thank you that he has stuck around.
Thank him personally if you see him.
2014, because there have been chances for him to leave. But while everybody else in the Big East, outside of really UConn, because they've only just had the one change in the last 11 years, there's a lot of movement, but the guy at Creighton continues to stay. I hope people that are on the inner workings realize that and appreciate that. But portal season is open for college basketball. It is open for coaches as well.
Greg McDermott court one day? Would that be fair? There's some great people you could...
I think we're a ways away from that. We got to talk about stay, go, or hello.
I like this game.
In the 25-26 roster before we start talking anything about that. All right, you can join the program. There's a lot of stuff to talk about on the weekend. I am getting to the best story, bar none, through the entire weekend in just a moment. But if you'd like to be involved in the program today, 402-951-1620. You can always email the show in the Equitable Bank inbox where they take banking personally, Gary at 1620thezone.com, or on the Twitter feed, which today you can get us at Gary Sharp 1620. So two things happened this weekend that if you're going to make a list at the end of the year where these are your top stories of the year, two happened this weekend.
Like end of the calendar year?
End of the calendar year, you do the top 10 stories, you do the news stories in state, you do the sports stories in state. Two of them happened this weekend. Omaha men's basketball is one of the top 10 news stories in 2024. Or what are we in, 2025?
I do that too.
2025. And then another one is what happened in Philadelphia.
Yes, I heard about that. That's pretty cool.
So Nebraska wrestling had their best finish ever. They had 2 national champions. For the first time since 2011, they had national champions. Now consider this is a sport that is dominated by Penn State. Absolutely a wagon when it comes to wrestling. One of the greatest dynasties going in college sports is Penn State wrestling. And there's a little bit of fatigue. Last year, they won by 100 points. Penn State had a wrestler who won his 5th NCAA title. Okay? That, the COVID year, he wins 5. There is some Penn State fatigue, but you got to give them their due. They're an incredible wrestling program that just won their 12th national title in the last 14 years, and they aren't the story coming out of Philadelphia. This weekend, the sport of college wrestling, which, to be honest, doesn't get probably its proper due because there's not enough people that have a microphone in front of them or a computer that they bang on the keyboard that know much about wrestling. In certain areas where wrestling is a hotbed, there are really, really good wrestling writers. Nick Rubeck, who covers high school wrestling for the state of Nebraska, doesn't necessarily cover Nebraska wrestling. Iowa has a dedicated high school wrestling beat writer and a college beat writer. There are other places that do it, but the sport kind of is confined to the coverage that it gets because not enough people know about the sport or respect the sport, which is an absolute BS. Because if you have ever wrestled or you know anybody that's wrestled or you've ever been to a duel, a championship, or the NCAA meet, you understand how big this sport is. And I would love to see the sport grow. I've got thoughts on how you let it grow, turning it into one semester, maybe not going head to head with the opening basketball weekend, but wrestling coaches are pretty diehard in keeping the sport the way it is with a tweak here or there. But this weekend, the story wasn't Penn State coming out of Philadelphia. It was what Nebraska wrestling did and one of the top 3 greatest upsets in the history of college wrestling. But it was a masterful week for Nebraska wrestling. And
shout out Mark Manning.
Well, I'm getting him a National Coach of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was just saying, when you get to the end of a season, I don't care if it's high school,
right.
I don't care if it's youth, I don't care if it's college or pro, and you just, like as a fan, you just say, hey, thank you. Thank you. You took me on this incredible ride. I enjoyed every minute of it. Instead of, God, those Masters commercials in February look great. I can't wait for this basketball season to be over. Is you also want to be proud. And look at to be a Nebraska sports fan, a fan of the athletic department in Lincoln, has been rough. It's rinse and repeat. You get kicked in the groin. And there are very few times when it comes to men's sports you can go, man, I'm proud of that program. And one of those things happened this weekend where you could look at Nebraska wrestling, whether you're a wrestling fan or you're just a fan of Nebraska, or you're a fan of stories, of perseverance, of a guy that has been the head coach at Nebraska since 2000. Since 2000.
Wasn't that long ago?
And is a great ambassador for Nebraska athletics and loves to sell his sport, sell his program, and he is accessible to the media. Oh, by the way, he's also got a son that's going to be a pretty good high school quarterback who will be a sophomore in the fall. But you could say, I was proud of Nebraska wrestling, and I'm glad it happened to Mark Manning. And I don't know if you've seen the picture, like when he was awarded the National Coach of the Year and his team lifted him up. Man, and I know, Mark, the joy on his face, because it's a journey. I was just talking about a 5+ month grind for basketball. I mean, we're talking about wrestling now. We're talking about the grind that is wrestling, where I'm sure Sunday morning you wake up and you're like looking for the best brunch in Philadelphia to just gorge yourself because you haven't been able to eat because you have to make weight, almost every single day. But I was so happy to see that picture because there was so much joy. And his staff is really good. But to make program history, where Nebraska was the talk of the NCAA wrestling tournament, they finished second. And not like this is a woebegone bad program that is down in the dumps, but it has been a program in the nation's toughest wrestling conference that gets overshadowed by Penn State. Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa have all had their bits. Minnesota has as well. And Nebraska wrestling has just hung in there. And in a sport where you also have Oklahoma State, that is a juggernaut, for Nebraska to finish with fairly comfortable, take advantage of the opportunities on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, whether there were injuries or upsets, and take advantage of those and win and rack up points and move guys along into the All-American status, that's pretty good. I mean, that's really, really good. Probably I'm underselling how impressive Nebraska was this weekend. And then you get 2 All-Americans. You get Ridge Lovett and you get Antrell Taylor, who is from Millard South. And Millard South Wrestling, which has been a wagon for a while, had a great weekend. Antrell, who was a 3 seed, and I watched him against Penn State this year, and I went to a couple of duels, and he struggled a little bit. And I loved him in high school. I thought he could be a FCS, FBS football player as well, playing at Millard South. But he wrestles. He wins the national title as a 3 seed. Isaac Trumbull, by the way, got All-American status from Millard South in heavyweight, and the 3 in front of him are moving on. And he also wrestled with a serious injury. He got beat by Hendrickson, who I'll get to in a moment. But you have 2 national champions, and then you have Hardy, who became runner-up, and then you have an impressive freshman in Minto at 165 who became an All-American. They had 8 All-Americans. 6 are able to return next year. It's just, you're proud of the accomplishment. because it's probably surprised you. And I think that's when sports hits you the most, when it's unexpected. Nebraska wasn't a favorite to finish runner-up to Penn State. Now, no one's going to beat Penn State. They weren't talked about as a team that was going to be the runner-up. It was Iowa. It was Oklahoma State. And,
usual suspects.
But in sports, the great thing about sports is you appreciate it even more when it's unexpected. And what Nebraska wrestling did this weekend was amazing, and it made people proud when they need something to latch onto, because a lot of us are already on to spring football. Hell, a lot of us are already on to Cincinnati.
I was going to say,
okay, baseball. Well, you stop by and you're like, okay, softball has got me intrigued, but the main major sports have been like, and now you have a great guy in Mark Manning, great ambassador for the sport, a guy that is true Husker man, leads his team to this kind of a finish with those many guys that have All-American status and a bright future. How can you not be proud of what they did? It was.
You're right, especially when you need something to feel good about. Yeah.
This is another thing I heard from people. This is how shows you how big it was this weekend. So you got March Madness going on. How many places did you go if you went out on Saturday night to like a sports bar to watch basketball? Did wrestling get the main TV? I heard from a couple of people that said, hey, guess where I'm at? And you won't believe what is on the 2 giant TVs. And I immediately said wrestling, and they said yes.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
It's a good story.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
We need those things sometimes. We really do.
Now, so Penn State dominating again wasn't the story. Nebraska wrestling was the story. And then probably a story that, I'm not going to say probably, was above it. In a sport that, again, fights for attention and fights on the sports calendar to get attention outside of the areas that are really, really good wrestling communities. The Pennsylvanias, the Michigans, the Iowa, the Nebraska, the state of Oklahoma. And in a sport where it seems like it gets more attention for schools that drop wrestling than do really well at wrestling. And the same suspects have been at the top in wrestling for a long time. But it's very much a solid group of people that support Nebraska wrestling and have been there since day one, since Tim Newman was the head coach at the Coliseum, and now Mark Manning's been the head coach for 25 years at the Devaney Center. But something happened in that sport on Saturday night that has a chance. I don't know if this will be the case, but has a chance to be on national shows because of what happened. One of the greatest upsets in the history of college athletics happened in that meet in Philadelphia. So Gabe Stevenson, who at Minnesota, 24 years old, national champion,
dude,
gold medalist, world champion,
big time dude,
tried out for the Bills, tried out for WWE, had a year to come back, had just dominated since he had returned. The uncomfortability of Minnesota taking him back, but in 2019, he was alleged sexual assault, so he had that hanging over him.
Oh.
But he was a star in a sport that not a lot of people recognize, but they recognize the name because of winning a gold medal, jumping outside of the sport, coming back into the sport. And it was almost a foregone conclusion that he was going to roll through the NCAA wrestling meet in his last year and win another national championship, which would be, I think, his third. And then all of a sudden, remember, he had the president was in attendance. Antrell Taylor's picture with the president is pretty funny. I don't know why President Trump put his hand behind the back of Antrell's head, but President Trump is in the building, and you have this match that is going on against Wyatt Hendrickson from Oklahoma State, who, by the way, is a lieutenant in the Air Force. Now, he's really, really good, but Stevenson is on a whole nother level. And to beat Wyatt Hendrickson wins one of the greatest upsets in the history of college wrestling. I don't think it's the number one upset because remember Dan Gable got beat in 1980, and I would
Even I've heard of that. Yeah.
Spencer Lee a couple of years got pinned, which no one saw coming. But the fact that you beat the beast and then to salute the president, the sport probably had its best Saturday night finals, and the Saturday nights are a final. The sport of wrestling knows how to put on championship events and make it to another level where it's extra special. It couldn't have had a better Saturday night than it had. And Nebraska was one of the key storylines behind one of the greatest upsets in the history of college athletics. Pretty damn good. Pretty damn good for Mark Manning, Nebraska wrestling, and the sport. And I don't know what it'll do for the sport moving forward. Will this mean more people go to the Vandy Center next year? Like when they broke the record against Penn State, they had 6,700 in there. Could they get 8,000 in there for a duel? Because Iowa will be in Lincoln this upcoming year. Maybe. But I'm happy for the people that have followed Nebraska wrestling for a long time.
Shout out Joe. Joe always calls in every once in a while. Let's talk about Husker wrestling.
And I get it. There's, people are like, hey, why don't you guys talk about Nebraska wrestling more often? To be honest, for some, it's a turnoff to talk like in the middle of the season wrestling on a sports talk show when basketball is going on. I'm just being honest.
But you've talked about it since I've been here more than anyone.
And I like wrestling. I grew up in Iowa, and my high school had a really good wrestling program, and so I followed it. And a friend of mine, his senior year, won a state championship in Iowa, and I remember celebrating with him. I mean, it was
cake
cool.
and ice cream.
One of the reasons why I wanted to be in radio, Ed Winiger, who passed away a while ago, was the voice of the state wrestling tournament at Old Vets Auditorium in Des Moines. And he was the Urbandale PA announcer, legendary, and they got a classic that is named after him during the season. So I like wrestling. Back in the day, and I wish I could remember his name, the World Herald had one of the best college wrestling writers because he would cover not only Nebraska, and Omaha was, Mike Denny was doing his stuff at the time, and Omaha wrestling in Division II was a banger. I can't remember his name, but he won award after award for his writing on college wrestling. But it doesn't, like just on radio, it doesn't get the clicks online, and that's how coverage is determined. So maybe there is more coverage across the board of the Husker media when it comes to wrestling. Like the Journal Star does a really good job of covering wrestling. Like Amy Just is a fan of wrestling. So that helps being a columnist. I hope that's the case. I also hope the sport takes momentum they have and they can find a way to build that so it's not just a 3-day attention where, okay, hey, the championships are in Philadelphia, for example, this past year. I'm going to pay attention to it. And then while we're at it, this might be a pipe dream, of getting the NCAA wrestling tournament back here in Omaha.
Oh, no, that's what I thought you were getting at.
I think there's some logistical things. I think there's some things in the way. I think there's some challenges with the calendar and that kind of things. But I don't know if it'll ever come back here. But it's a hell of an event to go to. I mean, it's an amazing.
Just the pictures overhead. I was like,
well,
ooh.
It's the best of the best.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Or if you go to the Big Ten wrestling tournament, I thought that was the best of the best. But great weekend for Nebraska wrestling. That's the story of the weekend. Omaha men's basketball and Nebraska wrestling already have 2 of the 10 slots when it comes to the best sports stories in 2024. All right. There we go. Now we can. It's the day off after 4 days of basketball. We can rest easy. We can breathe. There's a lot of stuff to discuss. We're going to talk about the gather step. We're going to talk about my guy, Dan Hurley. We're going to talk about what's next for Creighton, for Omaha, for Nebraska. And we've got spring football today.
80 degrees on Friday, too. Just put that out there for people to get excited about.
Wouldn't that be nice to have like a controlled scrimmage against another team? 80 degrees on Friday.
Ooh.
You know that if Colorado and Syracuse get that passed and they allow them to have a joint practice and a scrimmage, we will watch the hell out of it. It's funny how the spring football discussion in the college game has become such a lightning rod.
Yeah, I didn't have that on my bingo card.
But yet an unconventional thinker who makes sense that he would bring up this idea, which actually was an idea about 2 years ago that was floated by many, but nobody ever went through with it. Like, credit to Dion. He threw it out there and then followed up. We will watch the hell out of that game. ESPN would put that on and we would watch that. I might even watch it twice, even it's Colorado-Syracuse, because it would be a game in the spring.
Yeah, we like football.
We do. And we will talk football today because Nebraska, of course, opens up spring football. The third spring, wait a minute. Yeah. Trying to do the math there. Third spring football for Matt Rule with new faces in new places. So all that to come as we roll till 10. Matt is out today. It's Gary and Jimmy in 1620 The Zone. Thank you, Tanner. That picture wasn't Andrell Taylor, Caleb Smith, who they should have an ISO camera on Caleb Smith's parents, who you go through the ups and downs of their son wrestling by watching them. Tanner says Trump had a relationship with him prior to the tournament, has for a couple of years. Trump was supposed to leave 2 matches before Hendrickson, and he said to watch him. Thank you, Tanner. Tanner's got a couple other things on wrestling that we'll get to in the next hour. But these two guys have been waiting. Here is Eric. Good morning, Eric.
Hey, good morning. Hey, one of the two like big takeaways from the weekend. Well, actually, one was I'm kind of curious. First of all, congrats on the run, but I was kind of thinking about Omaha and Nebraska wrestling both. I think they're both sitting in like really good spots right now, and I think they could really parlay their success this past year and really kind of move. Nebraska doesn't need to move their program forward in the wrestling circles, but just with the general public,
Mm-hmm.
I think they could really do some things to really elevate that program. But I'm kind of curious.
What would be
Yeah,
what? And I'm with you.
I think.
I think do you have to put on the John Cook thinking cap and think bigger?
Oh,
So where
see,
would
this is what I was going to talk to you about UNO, but I actually kind of changed my mind. I'm kind of curious your thoughts on wrestling, and I'm glad you brought up John Cook, because if you know anybody that's close in the athletic department down there, Mark Manning is. I would say he's even with Cook as far as like coaches that are most respected in that program. I think he is
yes.
very, very far up there, if not 1A, 1B, with Cook. And I'm kind of curious if he would pull a page from Cook and try to get kind of what Iowa did not too long ago and get an outdoor duel at the stadium. I think that, if there was any time to do it, I think you could really, with the guys coming back, and do it maybe with Iowa or, one of the other teams. But I think you could really, really elevate the status of that program around the state. And, to hit on Manning too, his coaching job with throwing the brick with Antrell and getting him some extra time.
Yes.
That was an unbelievable coaching move. And I really hope people, I'm admittedly not a huge wrestling fan, but I tuned in this weekend, and it was an incredible coaching job by Manning. And I just really hope people realize like what we got with him, and then Burroughs and Green and everybody helping out. It's a pretty cool story. So I'm kind of curious if they'd ever think about doing an outdoor duel at the stadium and kind of having like a Nebraska wrestling day.
Yeah, I like where you're going. Wasn't it also added to Jordan Burroughs, who's on the broadcast, who I think he changes a little bit whenever a Nebraska wrestler is wrestling, because he doesn't want to have that attached to him as that, he just is favoring Nebraska. But I thought it was cool with him on the broadcast. So if I recall correctly, Iowa and Oklahoma State, they went to Kinnick Stadium, and wasn't it like in early November, like right at the beginning of the season, just because of the weather? And they did it.
They
set it up. They set it up in one end zone. They had maybe, I want to say 30,000, 35,000 maybe.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It was a pretty cool, event. And I think Nebraska, the way that we do big events, I think they could really do something with that. And I'm just kind of curious if they'd even consider it.
I think it would be on the table. They've, they considered about Nebraska softball playing Oklahoma at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah.
So,
Eric, so I think that'd be pretty cool. Thanks,
Eric. Thanks for the call. Let me just double check here. They would have a stretch from November 1 to November 28th, where if they would ever do something like that this upcoming year, they could do it, because you'd have to have Nebraska football out of the stadium for
a little bit,
a good 10 days or so. So it is possible. No, I think the whole sport, and let me sneak this in here with Tanner. Tanner sent an email, and the sport, I think, was ready to really take off, and then the COVID year stunted, which would have taken the sport to a whole nother level, because the championships that year were going to be at US Bank Stadium.
Yes.
And they had set it up where they were all ready for Saturday night of the NCAA championships to have 75,000 people. And they were going to set it up essentially like WrestleMania with these incredible entrances where, you come from a long way, and they have videos and smoke and fireworks.
They got to try this again.
That's a great
idea.
But inside of that stadium, they were going to take the sport to a whole nother level because of the visual that when you tune in, you're like, oh my God, they've they've gone to a football stadium, and there are people in the stands. So that was when COVID hit and they ex-nayed the championships. That was going to be one of those huge moments for the sport. Now they are going back to US Bank Stadium here shortly. And I wonder if they'll have the same setup, because we had Mark Manning on the air and he was so excited about what it was going to do to the sport. Because, the people go, oh, hey, WrestleMania. They were going to make it look like WrestleMania for college wrestling. And it was going to be he was explaining, he was all excited. He was talking about they're going to have fireworks, but they're going to have mats everywhere. And it's going to be 75,000 people. I'm like, man, I got to be there. Yeah. So they're going back there in a couple of years. Tanner adds, yeah, I think Omaha will struggle to get it because there's enough room under for teams to get their own section and warm-up area, which is unfortunate. We had it here one time. Now it won't be back. All right, we got to take a quick break. Nebraska will Mike stay there. We'll get to you at the other hour. Evan Bland, Jacob Bigelow a little bit later. We'll talk some football. We'll talk some basketball. We're on to the Sweet 16. Did you know that 4 teams from the Big 12 are in the Sweet 16?
Not who you think either.
It doesn't feel like it because only one has been in the league longer than 2 years. 7 SEC teams. Big 10 got off to a great start. And then we still could have a Michigan go to the Final Four.
Shout out Frankie.
All right, 1 hour in the books. There's Jimmy. Matt is out today. It's Gary and Matt on 1620 The Zone. All right, reset day from 4 days of college basketball. You get up to stretch your legs. The Sweet 16 comes back on Thursday. I should mention the portal is open for college basketball. Well, 4 tournaments are still going on.
Oh, yes. My alma mater is very much active on the portal app.
I pay close attention to the Summer League guys. Basically, in the Summer League, if you've won awards, you're gone the next year. So Oscar Clough, who was pretty good big man for South Dakota State, just put his name to the portal. That's not a surprise. Kansas would be a place to watch for him.
And pretty much any great player you see from what I've read, if you're really good at college basketball, there is a school for you.
Hey, Jimmy.
And I'm not even saying this, but this is what I've been reading. I was like, damn.
Jimmy, watching Hunter Dickinson play the other night against Arkansas.
Rough, wasn't it? Rough. Yeah.
That turnover.
Yeah. Wasn't that perfect? Right in front of you, too.
Yeah.
Here they're getting ready to work. And, well, it looks like we're done here, everybody. Woo pig.
Watching, like if you're a fan and you don't have courtside seats and you sit up, you don't truly get the feel of like the athleticism and length.
Yeah.
And then like you go to Nebraska and like media sit up in the corner. When you are sitting courtside and you watch Arkansas and KU and then St. John's, you get the full feel of those athletes are on a whole different level with length.
Yeah.
They're jumping jacks. You're like, okay, they are built different than the slow prodding team we saw in Lincoln this past year. Sweet 16 starts on Thursday, goes Thursday, Friday.
And we got the big boys. That's what we said.
You know what?
Should have good basketball.
We followed the norm of close games and blowouts. This is because we had one buzzer beater.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the best day, especially in the nighttime session, which we have to discuss the scheduling of the tournament on the weekends.
Well, you know how
they love their primetime Saturday and Sunday. These standalone
10 o'clock tips.
Oh, hey, Omaha and St. John's played at 9:45. Game didn't tip to almost 10 in Providence.
Luckily, it's you, so you're like, hey, I'm built for this.
Yeah. And then you don't leave the arena until like 1:30 in the morning. So I guess whatever you want to claim under the umbrella of a Cinderella, the lowest remaining seed is Arkansas. And I don't know if you'd consider them an underdog. Maybe the closest would be BYU, maybe? Because they're in with Duke, Arizona, and Alabama. But while there's not that quote-unquote Cinderella, and not having upsets gave us some great games in round 2, this might be one of the stronger Sweet 16 fields we've had.
Yeah, this might be actually really good. That's usually how it goes. When you get those big boys going up against each other, your 1s, your 2s, you get some epic clashes. I think of Duke, Kentucky in 92. That was a 1 and a 2. So I'm excited. We got our buzzer beater late last night. I don't like the late tips either, but apparently Izzo and Mick Cronin, all these guys, they make me sound happy.
Hey, Arizona, Oregon was perfect playing in Seattle last night.
Late.
Someone's going to have to explain to me the 3-sided scoreboard at the arena in
Ain't
Seattle.
That weird? Yeah, there's 2 boards, one on one side, one on the other, but please get the Sonics back there. It's a nice arena.
All right, we begin this hour with Nebraska Mall Mike. Hello.
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 John Calipari, thank you for knocking St. John's out.
That guy can coach, huh?
Now Spike Lee could go back to pretending Carl Anthony Towns can get him a championship.
He's not wrong, because he's not going to get him one.
It was just weird seeing Spike Lee there. Listen, St. John's has been horrible for 20 years. You didn't care then. You don't care now. It looks weird.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm going to go.
Okay.
Coach Crutchfield, I don't know if you listen, and I'm one person.
He's on the road recruiting, but I'll pass along the message.
It doesn't really matter. You can do what you want, but I'll give you 2 names. You want to build this program? Think Tom Brennan and Dana Altman. Tom Brennan spent 10 or 15 years at Vermont.
Okay.
And a couple of years, he beat the crap out of Syracuse and made a lot of money up there doing his thing.
I remember that.
Vermont, in ice cream country. Nobody watching, nobody paying attention. We got more bodies here than they did up there. He spent 15 years there, and we all know what Dana did here. Coach, I want to thank you for playing UNL football. I thought Greg Zerline was the last relic. You are. It's a wonderful thing to see, and I hope you stay as long as you want. This program can be built. It's going to be harder with the transfer portal, but they can do it.
Yeah, so the Drake job will open up, and his name will come up for that. I think Eric Henderson at South Dakota State would be the favorite for that job. Crutches, I don't ever ask. That's just not my place to ask. His wife is from here. His wife's mother, his wife's family is from Omaha. 2 of his 3 sons live in Omaha. One of his sons works for him. I think Crutch doesn't strike me as a guy, and his name should come up. But if they have another big year next year, his name will become even more talked about. But I wouldn't be surprised if his name pops up for some of these mid-major jobs over the next week when the dominoes kind of, start to move. I think the most ideal job for him, and this depends on Porter Moser at Oklahoma, Mike, because Porter Moser's name is being attached to Villanova, is Oklahoma, where he learned under his mentor, Lon Kruger, and was there for a long time. And he's got a great ties to the state of Oklahoma and the city of Norman. That would be a place that I think would make more sense, but he'll have options. He's a really, really good coach who it took a while before he got his first head coaching job, and he's excelled in it. He got, he said it was going to happen in year 3. It happened in year 3. But I feel good that he'll be back for a year 4.
Gary, I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy.
But gosh dang it, how'd we lose by 30?
I was stuck listening to a St. John's YouTube thing for the second half.
Why?
They had no idea where we were. They had no respect for us. It had nothing to do with us. And it was really painful.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening on the app.
This program can be built.
Well, it is building.
Nobody thought that about Creighton when it was built.
Well, the Summit League's a little bit different from even the Missouri Valley Conference back in the day, but the formula is still the same at this level. You have to recruit. Omaha prefers junior college kids. You got to keep them here for 2-3 years, and then if they get the opportunity, like look at Frankie Fiddler, Mike. Last night, I was happy for Frankie. He's had a rough year where he was in the starting lineup, asked out of the starting lineup. Has had his moments, but not probably as many as he thought he was going to be. But he's still going to the Sweet 16. He's playing for Tom Izzo. When he was called upon last night, he had his moment. The formula is to recruit, to find those gems, develop them, keep them in the program for a couple of years, and then you know what? Say, hey, go get your bag. Okay? You've helped us. You've helped us because you're going to help us recruit the next guy. That's going to have the same way.
I don't want Coach Crutch to stay too long because you know what the next thing's going to be?
What?
People are going to want him to go to Lincoln. I don't want him to go to Lincoln.
Well, I don't think he's going to Lincoln.
I don't want him there.
Well, why don't you?
Too much pressure in Lincoln for no reason.
Oh, no. The pressure in Lincoln is created by yourself. Okay? We have too many cop-outs for why Nebraska basketball hasn't been successful. Maybe it's just because, you know what? The coaching hasn't been good. The mixture of players hasn't been good. The last year was not a good fit. They fanned in the portal. They did not get the right players in the portal. They panicked in the portal. They missed on some guys in the portal. They had a bad year, but yet with a soft bubble, they almost made the NCAA tournament. If they would have gotten into the Big Ten tournament and just won one game, more than likely they sneak in to the NCAA tournament. And our conversation is different. The NIL is a scapegoat. Yes, it's a thing, but at the end of the day, it's coaching the players that you have to be successful.
Coach Hoiberg knows what he's got to do.
Well, and yes,
got to get the chemistry right. Period.
Well, and that's we've talked so much about.
Run.
Well, we talked about so much this year. Okay, they had a bad offseason that they still almost made the NCAA tournament. I don't know how they did. They can't make that mistake again. But the one thing is when Mike, and I know you love him, When does Nebraska get Fred Hoiberg? When does
What do you mean?
Nebraska get the
What do you
Fred
mean?
Hoiberg that they signed up for?
I don't think they're getting him.
So you don't think Fred Hoiberg, who has had his success in his career, will ever be at Nebraska?
I think if he would have, I think he would have shown up already if he was going to show up.
All right. Well, this now, the most important offseason they've ever had is coming up, and they've done their due diligence on quite a few portal guys, so they're a little bit further ahead of the game. They've had discussions with current players with the collective. It's just he's put himself on the clock for year 7. The whole football and men's basketball is a season of urgency in 25-26. So I want Nebraska to get the Fred Hoiberg they hired.
Fired with a better record.
Oh yeah.
To bring him in.
Yeah, I mean the record at some point is what it is, and it tells you exactly who that coach is. But we need to stop making excuses for Nebraska basketball. Okay.
You know I'm not though. I'm the last one's going to make excuses.
I know. I'm talking to others through you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No, it was really fun to see, and I just didn't want to see St. John's any longer than I had to see them.
Yeah, they're
no.
The best team in the Big East couldn't shoot very well, and Omaha didn't make shots, and they just don't have the kind of players that St. John's has. But they hung in there for a while.
You made the NCAA tournament. You won a game. You still lost twice to Nebraska.
All right, that's your parting.
Don't tell me how good you are.
All right,
you still lost twice to a team that didn't make the tournament. Think about that.
All right.
That is your legacy.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Please never change.
From that to old man Doug. Good morning.
Good morning. I tell you, I feel for Nebraska ball, Mike, because he's really passionate, and I mean, not that other Nebraska fans aren't basketball, but it's sad.
There are more, Doug. There are more out there than probably you realize of people that are passionate for Nebraska men's basketball.
Oh, good. No,
if they weren't, we would not even be discussing them.
I don't doubt that at all. In fact, pound for pound and win for win, they're probably the most passionate fan base in the country. Really, look at Iowa. They abandoned that team the last couple of years because they're not winning. The men's team. What a ride from Kalkbrenner, and for a brief period, Ashworth and Jemai Neal. So, really, I'm not disappointed in this season at all. I think Matt got a lot out of it. I felt at the beginning the chemistry was going to be, and not that the players don't like each other, but just getting used to each other and what have you. So I think all in all, it was a good year. No complaints. Going into next year, obviously, be Captain Obvious. They need to get a good 5 in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
And also we all have to realize as fans that whoever he isn't going to be as good as Kalkbrenner.
True.
Be nice to get somebody, a 2 or 3 year guy. There's lots of them out there. And the other thing is, I think they've got a good base coming back. Ty Davis has to make a jump. I think he's got a good chance to do that.
But let me just ask you quickly about him, because everybody's going to be looking for a 5. But is a primary ball handler the number one priority? Because I don't. Are you convinced that Ty Davis is that guy, or do you need somebody that makes Ty Davis point guard too?
Well, I just have faith in Max and the coaching staff's ability to develop. And I saw him at the beginning of the year, and I thought, oh, this guy's going to be really good. Then he made a lot of freshman mistakes, and then he came through in the one game when we really needed him, when Ashworth fouled out, and we were just stuck in the mud. I mean, that's one game too. You know, Ashworth, if I had one, small criticism of him was, and the whole team for that matter, sometimes they make some really passes that you scratch your head on and go, what were you seeing there? But they also make some great plays, so maybe that offsets most of it. But I'm assuming they'll probably get a transfer point guard as well. Everyone's talking about Pops coming back, which I hope he does. I think he's more of a 2 guard, and everyone's saying he's at the point. I'm
no.
Two.
I don't think you can have him as your primary ball handler.
But my biggest question is this revenue share, and I don't know enough about it. You got your basketball only schools, basically like Creighton.
Yes.
Is their rev share going to be every bit as good as Nebraska's, as an example? Because Nebraska's athletic department has the ability to give the maximum of 20 million,
20 and a half,
20 million some change. And let's just say they say, okay, basketball program, you get 20% of that. So that's 4 million. Does Creighton, I would think that they would. And I would also think that their NIL's pretty good just based upon their success. So I think Creighton can be as good or better than they have been. They may not be, but we'll see what happens with some of the rest of the Big East. Big East didn't have a great year this year.
No.
I'll admit to that.
It's been a take out UConn's run and Creighton last year. The Big East has had 2 back-to-back years where March has not been good to them.
But this might be the wildest portal/coaching off-season, we've ever seen, which is saying something. Sean Miller that blows it. I shouldn't say it blows me away, but I generally don't like Xavier fans. They troll a lot and whatever, but I feel
Bob
sorry
Huggins,
for
apparently.
them because here they offered the guy a second chance.
Yeah.
And did Sean Miller do that well this year, really? And has he done, other than when he was at Arizona buying players before it was legal, I think he did a better job the first time around at Xavier. And then here they give him a second chance and he spits in their face.
Yep.
And that's my problem with sports right now is that's why you got to admire Kalkbrenner. You got to admire some of these players that stick around that could go somewhere else. It sounds like
Doug, you should mention Mac. The fact that he has stuck around.
Especially, yes. I'm sorry. You're exactly right. Especially Mac. And the fact that, I'm sure through back channels, he was offered the Indiana job first. And he said no. And so, really, and here, I'm a free market entrepreneurial guy, whatever. But at what point, and I'm not at that point, okay, really,
okay.
We're a small bank, very humble, but at what point can you even spend, $20 million and to get 22 million? At some point you kind of have to like what you're doing, like who you do it for, where you do it. And I think that's Mac. I mean, he likes to golf around here. The community likes him. The expectations, I think, at Creighton are reasonable. So in some ways, I get why he's doing it, but he's just such a class act, and I'm so happy that we have him. Really, Hoiberg's a class act too. He just hasn't got it done yet. And will he? I don't know.
Anytime that the coaching carousel spins and Mac is still at Creighton is a win for Creighton because he's had opportunities. But it's a win for him to stay. And I mean, I think we're on the back 9 of his career at Creighton. I mean, I
would think so.
I think it's more on the retirement side. But then you make the decision on who is the next to take over. I mean, I think Alan Huss is probably the front runner right now to be the next head coach at Creighton whenever Mac says, you know what, time for me to go and play golf every day.
He would get my vote. And D-Rock would be right there as well. In my mind, Porter Mosier's a distant third. I just hope that High Point can keep him for a couple, 3 years, or when he does get a job, like, D-Rock going to Indiana. I mean, I'm a big Creighton honk, but going from Indiana to Creighton is not a promotion. It's not even a lateral. So I think, D-Rock does well, which his track record would say he's going to. His biggest challenge will be he's in a huge fishbowl now, and he's, West Virginia is a good program, better than Iowa in my opinion, but probably not as big a fishbowl there.
But he wins, and he'll put together a staff that will be able to go and get talent that he has never had access to before.
Amen to that. Well, anyway, go Jimmy. Your guys. I wish you'd have told me that chemistry thing before I picked him to go 2 rounds.
Whoa!
I've been saying it all year.
You picked KU to go 2 rounds? Come on.
I thought.
Doug, they hate each other. I know this for a fact.
I know. I texted my guy down there. I won't say his name publicly, but he travels with the team and
does he coach them?
No. I texted him. He's on the support side, but I'm like, I should have called him beforehand. So,
Doug, thanks for the phone call. The KU, K-State, other Nebraska, the approach to the transfer portal will be studied on how you build a roster and who you build it around. But let me quickly, before we go to a break, and Doug I got some thoughts on the Big East, which the Big East not having football actually benefits them in having to support football in this revenue share. The Texas thing with Sean Miller.
That's weird.
So, in my mind, Texas just got an okay hire.
Yes,
instead of being Texas and we go for the Bill Selfs of the world, which then
they should have gotten Will Wade,
which then would have, Mac would have been attached to KU, but Bill Self stays. 5 of the last 6 years, would you like to tell me how far KU has gone? One of those is they won the national championship, so that is out.
A lot of second rounds and first round.
5 of the last 6 years at KU, Bill Self has not made it out of the first weekend.
Yeah.
And this year they lost 13 games, which is the most at KU since '83.
And the first time that they've been knocked out of round 1 since I was a senior in college, and I am no spring chicken anymore.
And that game was pretty much even. I mean, a 7-10 game. You look at both those teams playing. Here's what I think KU will be better next year is because Hunter Dickinson is moving on. And KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris never got better from their championship team.
Yep.
And they relied on them so much.
That was 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. And poor KJ Adams, man, I do feel for him. What a crap way to end it all when at the end, blowing your Achilles. And that's pretty much that and Hunter Dickinson's Rod Strickland impression at the end with that pass. That did him in. That was it. And it's not like they were going to win round 2 either. So, surprise, Doug.
Those guys.
We tried to tell you.
They practiced right before us on Wednesday. You could tell that, we want to win. But, man, this season is over. We're on to the off season.
Already Cruton, and before you even leave the arena, Bill's like, "Oh, stud, we're going to come see you."
KU was kicking the tires on Summit League guys back in middle of February.
I believe it.
All right. Quick break. We'll come back. A lot of thoughts on this weekend of basketball. Also, spring football starting today in Lincoln. The Heinrich Harburg transformation to tight end. Backup quarterback. Who's going to be the center? Who's going to be wide receiver 3? Who's going to be on the defensive line? Who's going to be starting opposite Sierra Wright at cornerback 2? All of that to discuss a little bit later with Jacob Bigelow and Evan Bland, who will join Gary and Matt and Jimmy in 1620 The Zone. Hey, since 1996, Moose Roofing has been in Omaha. That's right, 1996. You know that they have helped out 15,000 people and their roofs. The most valuable asset to your home is your roof. And Moose Roofing is the MVPs in Omaha. Look at the reviews, talk to people that they have worked with, and they'll tell you that Pat and his team, which are local, are going to get the job done right. They're here before the storm. They're here during the storm. They're here after the storm. And now if this most recent storm, before we get the spring storms, has done some damage to your roof, you know the place to go. It is Moose Roofing. Now, they're great crew. They are very knowledgeable in their product, and they are very knowledgeable in what you need. They sit down and they listen to you, and then they offer solutions. They've got this highly durable lifetime roofing solutions. They've got ventilation expertise, which you don't find in many spots. But probably the thing that stands out and puts them above anybody else is their excellent service. Their service team is going to help you navigate the ever-increasingly difficult insurance process. And if you've had to deal with your roof and then you have to go through the insurance, you know what a pain in the ass it is. Moose Roofing is there for you. Locally owned, top-notch reputation because they are Omaha. They've been here since 1996. Let Pat and his team go to work for you. Contact them today online at mooseroofing.com. That's mooseroofing.com. All right, welcome back in on the Monday morning after the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. Women wrap up their round of 32 today. The portal is open. 4 tournaments are going on. You're more excited about portaling season or flight tracker season?
Ooh, I've been involved in both. That's a tough question. Portals, both are signs of instability to an extent. So we're going to go with portal because I'm here for the chaos.
So in the Crown, Nebraska plays 1 week from today.
I forgot.
Arizona State, one of Arizona State's top players, has just gone into the portal. But this is, I'm amused because with the portal opening up today officially, even though it's been open for a while, every player that goes into the portal, it seems like the same fan base responds.
Yeah.
A lot of it is Nebraska. And you'll at some point today talk yourself into Jaden Henley, who is the guard from UNLV, who is in the portal.
20-guy roster.
You also see Nebraska will reach out to a lot of Nebraska's net will be a lot larger and a lot more vocal than I think it was last year. But I'll give you an example of how this works because I know a little bit of insight here. Oscar Clough, who's at South Dakota State. And again, if you win an award in the Summit League, more than likely you're gone.
Yeah.
Let's see, the freshman of the year from Denver is in the portal. Markel Sutton will be in the portal. He has 1 year of eligibility left because he was a junior college player, and Omaha's fine with that. They knew that midseason that Markel was going to leave after the season was over because he got an opportunity to go get paid because he got an extra year.
Mm-hmm.
Thing for Omaha will be, can they keep J.J. White, who it's not a guarantee that he'll leave. He's also a junior college transfer, so he's got 1 more year to play. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other award winners. Clough was the defensive player of the year. So if you win an award in the Summit League, you're gone.
You'll have offers, and you'll probably take
one. It's the business now. The biggest thing that has really hurt mid-majors is the free transfer, where you don't have to sit out.
Yeah.
So the freedom to move has had a major impact on mid-majors. But in the Summit League, you get freshmen, you get sophomores, and then you send them on their way. So Oscar Clough, who was first-team All-Summit, probably was runner-up to Markel for the player of the year in the league. 17.6 points, 12.3 rebounds. He was only going to be in Brookings for 1 year. He started his career at Washington State, left Washington State because they had a coaching change. He goes to play for Hendo at South Dakota State.
Wait,
he
was this the Dan Jackson trade? They took the football coach and that. Okay.
So he goes to South Dakota State. Has a really, really good year. He's 6'11", great Australian accent, by the way.
I'm sold.
So, but it was already known because he had an extra year of eligibility that he was only going to be there for 1 year. And it has been known really since the start, but basically middle of the year when you started to hear about Power 5 schools that were kicking the tires with other teams in the league going, hey, what do you think of Oscar Clough? Do you think Oscar Clough could play here? Interesting that he goes into the portal and he has a no contact tag.
Oh, then we already know where we're going.
Well, so Kansas would be a place that it wouldn't surprise me that they have done their due diligence on him. But the thing about Eric Henderson, and again, I think if the Drake job opens up, which it's not open yet,
right? Because
West Virginia is very interested in Ben McCollum. Iowa athletic director
Drake's going to hate West Virginia.
Well, I mean, Drake knows they're going to lose Ben McCollum.
Yeah.
And yesterday was, after Drake got knocked out, everything was, he's going to Iowa, he's going to Iowa, he's going to Iowa. And then some people that cover the program really well, but also know the Drake program were like, not so fast. Because West Virginia is trying to get involved to get Ben McCollum.
Mm-hmm.
Because the athletic director at West Virginia did have some crossover with Ben McCollum at Northwest Missouri State. Can you imagine the Iowa meltdown if they lose Darren DeVries and Ben McCollum? But the Iowa athletic director is with the women's basketball team, and I think if she was stressed out, she would be in Iowa City or she would be somewhere else. So I still think Iowa is the place, but he's still the head coach at Drake. And I think then that job opens up. Mentioned in the first hour, Chris Crutchfield's name will get mentioned for it, but Eric Henderson of South Dakota State seems like a guy that would be a perfect fit to go from Brookings to Des Moines. The one thing about Hendo, and Hendo is off the Greg McDermott coaching tree. He's also got connections to TJ Otzelberger. Hendo takes care of his guys. Like Zeke Mayo was from Lawrence, played for him, won Player of the Year last year. You had Zeke go to KU and Frankie go to Michigan State. But Zeke wanted to go back home, and KU was interested because he's a Lawrence kid.
Mm-hmm.
But usually Hendo will help guys that have helped him. So he can, he said, look at Baylor Shireman coming to Creighton. Hendo had all the knowledge of what Mac's system does to give to Baylor. And so Baylor leaves Brookings and comes to Creighton.
It's paid off.
So,
Celtics, great.
So
Baylor
we'll see in this case, because I know that Clough and Hendo have a really good relationship. If it is somebody that Hendo is really connected to, where Clough ends up. But he'll be one of the most popular guys in the portal just because he's a 5. He's a true 5. He can step out and shoot the 3, but most of the time he's going to play around the basket. I mean, he was a walking double-double all season long, and his double-doubles were like 20 and 15 every night. But not having a no-contact tag is kind of interesting. On the opening day of the portal is open.
Watch it be neither of the schools, and it's someone that we don't know that's close by, very close by.
I'm
spitballing.
Hey, there is,
I said, this is fun.
There is a ton. This is a thing to watch when football opens up too. There is more money in the market right now before it gets more guardrails. Mm-hmm. So this portal season for basketball, which opens today and goes for 30 days, guys are going to make. Markel Sutton will make more money than Frankie Fiddler did, just because of the money that is available. Mm-hmm. Now, when football opens up, and Nebraska will still be in the middle of spring, well, not in the middle, but towards the end of spring ball. Will there be a star that wants to get more money that jumps into the portal that you don't expect in football because there is a great amount of money that is out there?
Yeah. Odds are yes. That's where we are.
How long did you go this weekend watching a basketball game where NIL or portal was not mentioned?
If we played the drinking game, I probably would have had alcohol poisoning by about 4:30 yesterday afternoon. It was often. It gets to a point where you're like, NIL, portal. He was there last year. He was there the year before. It's our new normal.
Well, so FAU, 3 players from FAU that went to the Final Four, or the last 2 years, there's 3 players that are going to be in the Sweet 16 with 3 different teams.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw that with some of the games where during the weekend, it was like, hey, these guys knew each other from then. And from that, I was like, whoa, I didn't know he was there. How about that? He's still good. This is where you almost need to keep score now just to see where everybody is. Well, but also you're watching the games and you're like,
That's why it's tough. Doug called in earlier in the hour about Creighton. And I think the core of Creighton Jackson McAndrew, he shot the ball better in the month of March than he did in January and February, and his development was kind of on par of how you thought it was going to go. Now, if he can play defense, then he's going to take his game to a whole nother level.
Pull a weight on.
He'll make another jump this upcoming year. Fedor sounds like he's going to come back. Pop Isaac's going to come back. You got Jason Green. You got Isaac Trout. I'm sure Mason Miller will follow his uncle. I don't know about Fred King. Might be time to move on from Fred.
Yeah.
I brought up, not that they would move on from Ty Davis, but I don't know that he's your number one point guard. But it's fruitless to sit here on the opening day of the portal and try and figure out what your roster is going to look like, because there might be surprises out there.
You're probably going to be wrong.
You don't know those conversations that have gone on about, hey, this is where I see you. I don't see you. I think it's important. I think you should go into the portal. I think you should go in early so you can find a spot. So trying to figure out what next year's roster is going to look like, and this is where, if you've sworn off college athletics, this is one of the reasons, because you can't figure out who's going to be here next year.
Yeah.
You got to be able to figure out your core.
Now imagine the coaches.
Well, that's another thing. And Mac's got an opening on his staff that what kind of an assistant does he fill with? You have to have your head on a swivel when it comes to basketball. But is the NIL discussion and the portal discussion when it comes to basketball swallowing up the basketball? You could not go. You could not go a weekend. You could not go a game this weekend, Jimmy, where that was not, the rarity of, like a Kalkbrenner being at a school for 5 years, 169 games, or Omaha's guys that were here for 3 years. Those are few and far between. It's the Caleb Loves of, okay, what Where wasn't he there?
When did he go there?
Last year.
Yeah.
And that's just, guys that have been at a school longer than 2 years are wondering what's wrong with them. And then where are they going to be next year? Mm-hmm. But the portal discussion or the NIL discussion is more of a turnoff to you when you're watching a basketball game in March Madness.
Yeah, because this is what we enjoy.
Which one? The portal discussion or the NIL discussion?
Both.
I mean, I know they're kind of tied together, but
I understand.
But the NIL discussion, I thought this past weekend went to a whole nother level. Because Calipari even brought it up. He said the pressure of the NIL. Look at Coleman Hawkins at Kansas State. Went on a tirade that he was upset that his number got out that he was making $2 million.
Didn't you predict this would happen eventually when this all started? And now it's, look at this.
Yes. People talk. People know how much you make. And if you're not living up to that amongst your teammates, it's going to create problems in the locker room.
Yep.
Look at coaches that are banging their head. They can't complain about it. They got to play the game. But they know if they don't play the game right, they're screwed.
Wasn't Porter Mosier complaining about support for the program and stuff like that? No. So people are already saying, "Oh, Villanova."
Everybody's angry. Look at Kevin Willard, for example. Kevin Willard is actually in a fascinating position. He's got his team to the Sweet 16. He has an incredible freshman who saved their season last night.
Homegrown guy.
And a good program that probably doesn't have the same cachet as it had when it was in the ACC. Mm-hmm. But Maryland basketball is still pretty good, and they're producing dudes. He lost his athletic director. He was already upset about some of the support for his program. Look at the position that Kevin Willard is in right now. They're in the Sweet 16. He wants certain things for his program. His players love him because, as they said last night, he pays us.
Yes.
He pays us.
Be honest, I respect it.
But he could use leverage of, what if Villanova wants Kevin Willard?
What if Texas had wanted them instead of Sean Miller? Should have waited.
I mean, I don't know if we're there or we're getting closer to when this just blows up and people are like, I've had it. Well, you know what? This is what you wanted.
Yeah.
And you've gotten it, and you got to deal with it. But at the end of the day, sometimes the NIL is used as a scapegoat. If you can't coach basketball, if you can't assemble a roster, and all of a sudden, we look at Nebraska, and I know you got to have money to play the game. And who was it yesterday said the average roster right now is 500,000, average starter for 500,000. So do the math. Some programs' budgets are not even that.
Yeah. That's, if you start with that, that's minimum 500,000. That's 2.5 million for a starting lineup.
But Jimmy, haven't the best players always gone to the best programs?
Usually. That's what we were raised with. The thing that I get intrigued with NILs, that changes the playing field a little bit. Certain, like in football, look how Texas Tech and the West Texas oil money has gone all in, and they're trying to buy themselves in. I'm not judging. I honestly, I'm not saying anything negative because that's the game now. So I can't fault anyone for playing the game. Basketball, same thing. Last week, we talked BYU and everything that they've done with the talent that they're assembling, and new players are coming in, and then old players may be coming out. You talk about Maryland, which has been a great basketball program over the years, and you have their coach saying, hey, I need the support. Wow, I couldn't imagine Gary Williams saying that 25 years ago, but here's Kevin Willard, good coach, saying that. And so then if he leaves because he doesn't get it, people are like, well, it's a mess. So at what point does it, like you're saying, like everybody?
Yeah. All right, when we come back, there is news out of Iowa City that we will share with you. Bo Ryan may have just been hired at Iowa.
Oh?
Remember him?
I do.
We'll get into that. Next hour, Evan Bland stops by. Another bad weekend for Nebraska.
Damn, that's a hell of a tease. Now I'm
Matt's out this morning. It's just Gary and Jimmy on 1620 The Zone.
Hey, it's still basketball season, at least in the college game. Yes, in the pro game too. And when your favorite stars score buckets, all of us are alley-ooping you an opportunity to win money from watching sports with Underdog. Shout out LeBron for stinking it up Saturday night. I love you. You helped me. I was great. Anyway, back to the read. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on what are the stats, points, assists, rebounds, more. And they've got all your favorite leagues, team stars to choose from. You're doing college basketball picks, NBA picks, NHL picks, golf picks, you name it. Baseball is coming very soon, and that's a lot more fun to play with than you understand on this because they were good to me last playoff. Can't wait. Maybe I just can't wait for baseball season. Anyway, this week on Underdog, I'm looking at some Sweet 16. Tournament was pretty good to me the first weekend. I'd like the second weekend to be any better, and it can be for you too. Just download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code ZONE to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. It's legit. It works. Trust me, when you make your first deposit. Join in on all the fun when you sign up with promo code ZONE. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon first deposit. Must be 19 plus in Nebraska and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org.
All right, breathe easy, Iowa fans. You're about to have a drastic change as your head basketball coach.
Lay it on me. This is fascinating.
From Fran's personality, his tendency not to care about defense, you just hired Ben McCollum from Drake. Now, Ben McCollum has been a winner at Division II, yes, Northwest Missouri State, but he was really, really good there. His lone year at Drake, you saw what he did. He won a game in the NCAA tournament with guys that he brought from Northwest Missouri State, and he will bring his point guard to Iowa. He has been hired as the new basketball coach at Iowa.
That's a great hire.
West Virginia tried to get in there, but Iowa makes a hire of a guy that seems to be the right fit. And I've always said this, if you can coach, you can coach. If you can coach ball, your thing when you make a jump like this is, what do you do with your staff to go get players? Because you will have access to players that you've never had before, but can you seal the deal?
Mm.
Either with the NIL or the fact that you're just selling yourself. I said to Nebraska Ball Mike when he called in, I said, when does Nebraska get Fred Hoiberg? That Fred's not comfortable getting guys just because they want cash, they're coming to play for him.
That was a great question.
When does Fred Hoiberg be Fred Hoiberg and sell Fred Hoiberg? That's what Nebraska needs. So you have to be able to sell yourself, but you have a little bit more behind it. So how he accumulates players will be fascinating because that'll be the challenge of going up to that level. But I think he's Bo Ryan. Remember Bo Ryan was great at Wisconsin Platteville. Won titles. I mean, this is kind of like Lance Leipold,
I was just
right?
going to say.
So Lance Leipold leaves his time at Omaha and Nebraska, and he goes to Wisconsin Whitewater, has success, win titles, starts to work his way up, and then gets the biggest opportunity of his life. And outside of last year, KU football is headed in the right direction.
We get our stadium back.
So you hire Ben McCollum, who has 1 year at Drake. And listen, the athletic director at Drake, man, he's just been hitting home runs. I mean, they've gone from Nico Medved to Darren DeVries to Ben McCollum, and now the next guy, who I would look to Brookings and Eric Henderson, or even Craig Smith, who is out of a job, who has been in a mid-major before at South Dakota, and his name was mentioned in the Nico Medved time of could he be the next head coach at Drake. But Bo Ryan could coach ball.
Yep.
And Bo Ryan made the transition from working his way up from Division III all the way to Division I. And what did he do at Wisconsin? He never won a national title.
He was close, though.
He was close.
He was so close.
He was close. By the way, speaking of Wisconsin, this shows you how great John Tonje's season was. Do you know that he was only 8 points behind Frank Kaminsky's single-season points record?
I believe it. He was awesome.
And Frank Kaminsky played a little bit longer that season. That's a hell of a year for John Tonje at Wisconsin. But what did they do at Wisconsin? They got Wisconsin into the NCAA tournament, and they won games in the NCAA tournament. I see him as Iowa's Bo Ryan. Here's the other difference is you look at Darren DeVries, hired at Indiana. Nico Medved's going to be hired at Minnesota. Ben McCollum. There are really good X's and O's guys, like good X's and O's guys that are in the Big Ten. He is a defensive whiz. So Iowa will go from giving up 76 a game to somewhere in the 65 range.
To start.
Also, the running up and down the floor, which you see guys from Iowa that are in the portal, that's the style they wanted to play. I don't think they're all of a sudden going to jump back into the boat because the tempo will be a lot slower.
Yeah.
Because that's what Drake plays. If you've watched Drake play this year, it's amazing how many times I watched them where the shot clock would get to about 5 and you'd be like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And they would know exactly what they're doing. And they would run a set that would get a shot. And they probably led the country in shots made in the last 4 to 5 seconds of the shot clock. He can coach ball. There are higher level coaches that use him as a resource. It's a smart hire. It's a fit hire. Is he going to win the press conference? I don't know. He's a little bit awkward, like just being interviewed, but he's a really, really good guy. He's a good basketball coach. That's a good hire for Iowa. And I wonder if it gives you an inkling of their athletic director who just made her first big hire.
I see.
If that
Okay.
gives you an idea of how they'll approach when they have to make, when Kirk Ferentz decides that he's ready to retire. So it's a good hire for Iowa. It's good for the Big Ten. The Big Ten with coaches have gotten better over the filling of the Indiana, Iowa, and now the Minnesota job, which I expect Nico Medved will be announced here shortly now that Colorado State season is over.
And the thing about Ben McCollum is he can go both ways. You want to slow it down? If he gets the right fit, you can speed it up. That's a really, really good ball coach.
How about Drake, though? Two straight years they've lost their head coach.
Watch them hit another home run.
Well, so their athletic director likes upper Midwest guys. That's why I think Eric Henderson of South Dakota State would be a great fit at Drake. All right, 8:02, Evan Bland coming up in the next hour. Also, Jacob Bigelow stops by with his thoughts. Has this been a good tournament? Yay, nay? And we will talk about the gather step. On the playground, would you call it? Old school college basketball in the NBA, would you call it? How about in 2025? A lot of people are debating the Queen game winner yesterday against Colorado State. We will as well when we come back mornings with Gary and Matt, 1620 The Zone.
I thought about this song during the weekend.
Are people sick of the Geico pig commercial or the Jason Bateman Batman commercial?
See, that one's mine. But I liked Maxwell the pig 15 years ago. Shouldn't he be grown up by now? Living in a college house in a college town with a bunch of guys?
The other thing, have you noticed less gambling ads?
Yeah. Which is surprising the day we live in. And I had a good weekend in that too, so.
I've not seen a lot of gambling ads inside. I don't, matter of fact, I don't know if I remember one inside of the play-by-play of the March Madness.
Mm-hmm.
But you see the same 10 commercials 1,000 times.
That's what I don't
all you
get.
do is watch basketball all weekend. At least that we do not have the Chet Holmgren and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander commercial back from last year.
Yes.
And also, what happened to Lily from AT&T?
That's what I want to know. I don't want Blake Griffin. That doesn't do anything for me. Lily brought America together. I think she's outgrown the ad. She had about almost a 10-year run too.
So as AT&T retired her?
I think so. And with that, I've retired AT&T.
This is their, hey, you should be on T-Mobile. You know what tomorrow is for T-Mobile customers?
Oh, yes.
So last night was the last Sunday without Major League Baseball until October. Okay? We are coming up on a time where we will have ice cream in a helmet. We will have baseball. Thursday is opening day.
Unless you're a Met game, you get hot dogs in a helmet.
I saw that. Well, we'll have, later in the week, we'll have power rankings of things that should be in a helmet that you can eat. But tomorrow is the T-Mobile Tuesday, where every T-Mobile customer gets free MLB TV.
That's a banger. Come on. Are you able to see the 12 teams, though, that we're blacked out here?
The only one that is blacked out here is the Royals.
Oh, okay. So we've gone down. We enjoy all the baseball.
But I have, what do they call it? FanDuel now? Whatever the Royals are going to be on. But they're the only team that is blacked out in Omaha for right now.
For now, yeah.
All right. Evan Bland's going to join us at the bottom of the hour. Today is the opening day of spring football in Lincoln. Nebraska baseball, another lost weekend when it comes to the Big Ten, which in late May in this town, Omaha is hosting the Summit League. Nebraska is part of the Big Ten tournament. You have those two tournaments, and right now, neither of the locals would be in it.
That's not good.
Omaha's off to an 0-6 start in the summer. They got swept by Oral Roberts. They play Creighton, who got a nice walk-off yesterday in a sweep of St. Mary's College. They play over at Tal Anderson at 5 tomorrow. And Nebraska currently in baseball, with all of the hopes and dreams and the momentum of last year, are 16th in the league of the 17 teams. Only Ohio State is worse.
Hey, Nebraska greater than Ohio State. Just leave it at that.
So Evan will join us to try and figure out, is this Will Bolt's fault? Stick with the lineup, same lineup. Just let it ride for a couple of weeks, Will. Just let it ride for a couple of weeks. This lineup gymnastics is not working. So Evan will join us coming up at 8:30. Jacob Bigelow at 9. First, here is Joe. Good morning, Joe.
Morning. How are you guys?
Good. How are you doing after this weekend?
Did something happen this weekend? No. I am still pretty stoked about Husker wrestling. First time I've mentioned it. Just kidding. I've been begging, I've been pleading, I've been asking for a little bit more coverage on the Husker wrestling team, and my goodness, they finally had a good NCAA tournament, and it was amazing. The whole night, if you watch the NCAA tournament, the whole night was like phenomenal. I didn't get to see it as it happened, but I got to see a replay of it, and how about them Husker wrestling?
Hey, it was a great showcase. I mean, everybody they brought to Philadelphia contributed. They were, 34-14 for the 3 days?
8 All-Americans. Yep.
Well, and
2 national camps.
Well, and the stories are good. You know the story of Ridge. I mean, here's a guy who has really run the gamut during his career, and to get back to the top of the podium, I mean, is a hell of an accomplishment. Taylor is someone that
absolutely.
Taylor is probably someone that surprised you a little bit. He wins it as a 3 seed. Hardy, that was a little bit of a heartbreaker. But I brought up one guy to keep an eye on because I think he's going to be a dude. Minto is going to be really, really good. And for him to finish as an All-American 4th at 165, I think bodes well for the future. I mean, 6 of the 8 guys are eligible to come back next year.
Camden McDaniels
yes,
did really well. Jacob Van D in the wrestleback. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Everybody contributed. 8 All-Americans. We brought 9 dudes. 8 of them walked away with All-American status. 2 national champs, 1 runner-up. Taylor's got a great story. I would agree with you. Ridge sort of ran, he was number 1 all last year, pretty much the whole year, and, hit some hard times, but he was able to bounce back. But that's it was amazing. And Manning deserves some flowers. Snyder deserves some flowers. The whole team deserves a little praise. But that's what I got. Yeah, Green coming back. Yep.
Hey,
for the time, guys.
Hey, no. Let me ask you, Joe. So
okay, yep,
okay. So you follow the sport, and I know you go back a ways. They'll always talk about Dan Gable getting beaten 80. I think Spencer Lee getting pinned a couple of years ago was like, oh my God. Is the upset that happened at heavyweight Saturday night the greatest upset in the sport?
I think everybody uses that term a little too loosely. When it happened, I mean, it was. I agree with you. Those are like top level. So it's kind of hard. You could go back and forth. It was a giant upset, and the place was rocking when it happened. I didn't get to see it live, but I watched the replay of it, and it's right up there. I don't know if it's the GOAT upset of all time, but man, boy howdy, it was something. I didn't expect it.
It was stunning. I mean, that's what it was.
Absolutely, yeah. And the guy's a service member.
Yeah.
Whether you like the president or don't, I do. Well, but he salutes the guy.
It was.
Just a magical moment.
It was the moment. I mean, it happens to be a lieutenant in the Air Force who salutes the president. Yeah. It all came together. I mean, it was a great night for the sport, but even better for Nebraska.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree 100%. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Joe is one of those guys I was mentioning earlier.
He's who I thought of the other night when it happened.
Every time Joe calls in the show, he goes, hey, can you guys talk about Nebraska wrestling? And we'll talk about Nebraska wrestling for a little bit. He used to get on Happer. I don't know if he still calls it a Connor show. He used to call in and he goes, hey, why don't you guys talk about wrestling at all? At least we would dabble in it a little bit. And when Damon was here, Damon's connection to the sport of wrestling, we would talk about it even more. So, but yeah, he'd call Connor and he'd be like, hey, you guys going to talk about wrestling?
Yeah. I'm glad Joe called him because I did think of him the other night when that happened. I was like, oh, he's probably loving that. And yeah, good man. So thanks for calling in, Joe.
And I wonder how the guy, gosh, I can remember, he always sits close to the mats, front row next to the Nebraska coaching staff. He's there all the time. He's a diehard fan. I don't know his name, but every time I've been to a duel, he is always there. Those are like those are the people that you think about that have been there from day one, because there have been moments where, you've wondered, has Mark Manning capped out in what he's been able to do with Nebraska wrestling? Are they in a conference now as they make the jump from the Big 12 to the Big 10? Is Nebraska wrestling going to get passed by? And there have been murmurs, over the last decade of, maybe it's time to move on. But every time it seems like there is any doubt, Mark Manning just reminds people he's really friggin' good. And he's got a program that needs more attention. And now we'll see, because NIL is part of the discussion when it comes to wrestling as well.
There it is. That's the truth.
Does wrestling have a whale?
All it takes is one. I know what you mean.
I have, we're on this, Warren Buffett's name always comes up. Can Nebraska find the whale out there that wants to win so bad for the school that he supports or his alma mater, and he loves athletics?
Yeah, this is to pay, not to
that
wrestle.
They have expendable income. They're like, you know what? What do you need? I got $10 million. Okay, here you go.
I got you.
Nebraska volleyball got a big $5 million donation. You haven't heard about big singular donations like you do at Texas Tech. Maryland, for example, got a big donation to chase that whale. That is a singular person that's like, yeah, I'll write your check, whatever you want. Do they have that person in wrestling? Because it's going to take some money to compete. It's wild to think that a wrestler could say, hey, I need $300K to stay. Because you think of that sport of you're in it because of the sport.
Yeah.
But it's the reality of the world that you live in. Guys across campus are getting paid. I have the ability to get paid. I want to get paid. And I think wrestling coaches probably have had a tougher time adjusting in a sport where you don't think about, you think that the athletes are there for more than the money. And so when they come to you about money, or you're recruiting and you say, hey, Penn State is offering me this, what do you got for me, coach? And you're like, you just don't want to wrestle? You don't want to wrestle at a great program?
Give you some gear.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice.
So I looked this up as Iowa has made it official. Ben McCollum is their new head coach. So he leaves Drake after 1 year, 31 wins. They beat Mizzou, lost.
Did the Lord's work?
Lost to Texas Tech the other night. So they got knocked out of the tournament. I went out and looked into their stats on Ken Palm. Low-scoring basketball may be back in the Big Ten.
The Big Ten's going back to being the Big Ten?
Their tempo would have been last in the Big Ten this year. For a program that they're going to have whiplash in Iowa City. They went from watching Fran not have any defense, but have really good offense and run up and down the floor and play 89, 87 games. They're going to watch 65, 62 games.
Now, that might be a stretch. But hey, if you have 65, who cares? You win. And then you win again, and then you win again, and suddenly it becomes a habit, and you find yourself in the tournament.
Bob writes into the Equitable Bank inbox. This is I made a passing comment about Sean Miller, who was hired at Texas. And this was inevitable. Before Rodney Terry went on the Elite Eight run, when he had to take over for Chris Baird in the middle of the season, Sean Miller was going to be the guy. Chris Del Conte was going to hire Sean Miller, but Rodney Terry went on the run to get to the Elite Eight, and Texas went with Rodney Terry. But you had heard, like, Bill Self's name had been attached to Texas. Hell, I
don't laugh. They got endless pocketbooks.
Someone this weekend said, watch out for Texas and Mac. But Sean Miller's name was always mentioned. Bob asked, you sound like you do not approve of the Texas hiring of Sean Miller. He's a really good coach. He knows the X's and O's as well as almost any coach and gets his teams to play hard. I think he's a great hire for Texas and a great move to recover from the big misstep in getting rid of Baird.
Okay.
So probably when do you think that, and I'm asking kind of a leading question because I already know the answer to this from my standpoint. Do you think Texas basketball is a top 10 job?
No. However, it can be because of the financial resources if you get things to line up the way you want to. You can't deny that. For Sean Miller, hey, it sucks what he's doing to Xavier, like Doug said when he called, but how can you turn that down with the possibilities and the potential? And then, yes, I remember this, that Del Conte had zeroed in on him before. So he must really believe in him. If a few years later, it's like, no, let's try this again. But I just can't see if a lot of the Texas fans, Bob's email is interesting and he has some great points because I wonder, is that the prevailing sentiment or do most people, are they like, really, that's it? And I keep seeing it. It's like a lukewarm reaction, but hey, could be completely wrong. Is it a top 10 job? No.
See,
could it be? Yeah.
Sean Miller is a good coach. And, now Xavier has to pivot. I heard Chris Mack. Man, the Big East loves rekindling relationships with former coaches.
Yeah.
They love that in the Big East. So Chris Mack's name has been attached to the job in Cincinnati. I read Pat Kelsey from Louisville at one point said that's his dream job.
Xavier?
But if you just made a mention after you got beat by Creighton the other day that Louisville will have $8 to $10 million to spend in the portal, I don't think you're leaving Louisville.
I was like, they
ACC,
care.
The ACC may be a mess, but Louisville is still a really, really good job. But back to Texas.
They'll probably be in the Big 12 one day.
Well, they could be.
Couple years.
Be with the Big East if the ACC and the Big East merge for basketball. I don't think Texas is a top 10 job in basketball. Just because it's Texas and they have more money than God, and they are the New York Yankees of college athletics.
And God's a major donor to Texas football.
Doesn't mean what past history at Texas would tell you that this is a incredibly great top 10 basketball job. They played in a drum.
Mm-hmm.
They did not fill the drum.
No, only when Kansas was in town.
Now, they've had some good players, TJ Ford, Kevin Durant, but they did not fill the place. Then they moved to the Moody Center.
And half of it's closed off if anyone's not been there.
Yes, which is wild to me because you look at it and you go, why did they build this arena in Austin and they make it so small? But the barriers that they have on the upper level, they have those cover up seats. So for basketball, they try and make it an intimate atmosphere, and I think it's 10,000?
If that, yeah. And even then, they don't completely fill it.
Could Texas be a top 10 job down the road because of the resources that are available and the conference they are in?
Sure.
Yes. But as of right now, there is nothing to me that says that Texas basketball is top 10. If you look at past history, now if Chris Beard had not gotten in trouble,
they've been in good shape.
He's going to be the dude there.
Yeah.
But I think the impression of Texas basketball, and they've had this incredible history, and they've competed for national championships, has been clouded because they wear Texas across the front of the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthew McConaughey is their hype man.
Yeah.
Could it be? Yes. Has it been? No.
Will it be?
Would you put Texas basketball right now ahead of Tennessee?
No.
Would you put it ahead of UConn?
No.
You're not going to put it ahead against Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, or North Carolina?
I'll go with no on all of them.
Would you put it ahead of Louisville?
No.
Would you put it ahead of Michigan State?
No.
Would you put it ahead of Arizona?
No.
Could it be? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you put it ahead of UCLA? Tradition, no.
But
potential
yes.
with the resources that are available in terms of cash to go acquire players, hell yes.
Yes. I'll tell you a story. I worked in the MIAA back in the day, and my athletic director was an assistant to Tom Penders in the late 80s and early 90s. And he told me, people remember Tournament Tom, the running horns. He said, we played that style because, and this is when Texas football wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire. He says, even at that time, it was football, football, football. We had to give people a reason to come to the Irwin Center to fill it. So we gave them an exciting style of basketball. And you'd see that. You'd get these 105, 98 games. And he became known as Tournament Tom because they'd get in the NCAA tournament as a kind of lower seed, and then they'd make a run and get you all captivated. But it's never, even when Rick Barnes had it going at its peak, they rarely sold out. They might sell out a rare A&M game or a rare Tech game, but for the most part, it was always only when Kansas came to town. And it was like the Lakers coming to town because half the fans were all Texas KU people that were there. That's why they did this with the Moody Center. And today, in the day and age that we live in with NIL and all the stuff we've been talking about the first couple of hours, football is even more important, especially now that Texas is in the SEC. So, and this is why Shaka, and I think you said this, Marquette was a better fit for him than Texas, not because he was a bad coach, but it's just the way the ideology and everything they think of. Basketball to them is sort of just something to get them to spring football. It's just how it is. Texas has always been pro basketball. College basketball, when you would say that, hey, people that just check in for the tournament, nice to see you, welcome to the season, I always think, oh, this is back home because it's exactly what it is. That plays when you're a coach trying to recruit players. Like, well, they don't even care. Why do I want to pay? We'll pay you. Okay. But other than that, they don't care till it's the thing to do to care.
Since 2008, 2009, the only coach that has gotten them to the regional final has been Rodney Terry. And you could make a case that Rick Barnes, who was at Texas for a long time,
he needed a fresh start.
And he's a better coach at Tennessee, where Tennessee is going to their third straight Sweet 16. You could probably make a case. And I get why you would go from VCU to Texas with Shaka, but it seemed like an odd fit. And he didn't get fired there. He left to go to Marquette. You left Texas
happy
to go to Marquette.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a top 10 job right now. You're in the SEC. There is more money to be discussed.
Beard could have made it a top 10 job. He was on his way.
Well,
he screwed it up.
7-1 until he messed it up.
And he did. See, remember the videos he used to shoot for social media where you have to kind of go outside the box to draw people in. But once you get them in, if you give them a product, hey, everybody loves a winner. It kind of reminds me in a small way of when we talk about Nebraska basketball. It's football, 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 but you do have some fans that want to win. Now, Nebraska basketball fans more passionate than Texas basketball fans. That's not what I'm saying, that they're the same, but it's the same concept. Give them a reason to come. Give them a winner, and they'll all come.
Hey, one thing that has been dispelled, and whether it be BYU has shifted kind of from a football school to a basketball school, is this notion that you just have to be a football school, that if football is such a beast that you just hang around in between the end of the season and spring ball has been wiped away if you make the right hire. Mm-hmm. Look at Alabama.
Yeah.
So Alabama now is in their third straight Sweet 16. They hire Nate Oates, who, I mean, Nate Oates was what, Buffalo?
Yeah.
Greg Byrne made a really smart hire for what he needed in basketball, and he hired a winner who came from Buffalo but had won. What is that? 4 of the last 5 years they've been in the Sweet 16, but 3 straight years at a football school.
Yeah.
So anybody that ever brings that argument up is, you know what? We're a football school first and foremost, and second and foremost. Stop them.
Look at Florida, 06, 07. Perfect example. They were so good. They had dude after dude and a great coach.
Now, there's using Nebraska as an example. The best stretch of Nebraska basketball in my lifetime of following them, which started in the early 90s, what was also good on campus?
Football, and it was really on the rise to its, to unprecedented
Nobody
levels.
was saying that Nebraska basketball can't be good because it's a football school. The football team was winning national championships. The basketball team was grabbing a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, or at least every year.
Yeah.
Danny had them in competition to win the Big 8 at Kemper and be a good seed, like a 6 seed or so, in the NCAA tournament. So both can be good at the same time.
That's why you say it's a golden era.
I know there was a discussion all over the place on social media this weekend about funding Nebraska basketball. Just stop what you're doing. Football is number one in terms of funding. That is the cow, okay? We are all sucking off the teat of the cow. That is football. And Nebraska needs football to be very good. Nebraska also needs to fund and make sure that the number 2 sport on campus is also good, and that's men's basketball. Fully fund it, do what you have to do, and both can be good at the same time.
I believe it was Mangino that said when I was in school, last I checked, we don't play the basketball team. I could be wrong. I'll check with the media people. But that was always the thing. It was like, why does it have to, and I never understood, why do you have to choose one or the other? Why not just win because it says what it says on your jersey?
You can use it as your advantage. I mean, football is the front door to Nebraska athletics.
Absolutely. And it's a hell of a front door.
And you can use it as an advantage. And I'm not saying that Fred doesn't, because they fully understand where their seat is. Their seat should be number 2.
But you can use it.
But you use it to your advantage of having a football program, but not using it as an excuse that you can't be good. Or let somebody use an excuse of, hey, we have to take care of football. No. What's the next sport that makes money here? Take care of us. But then you need to see a return on investment.
Yep.
And both being good at the same time has not happened in a while. All right. Quick break. Come back. We got Evan Bland in the hour here. Talk some baseball, start of spring football. Jacob Bigelow at the top of the hour. He'll give his grade on the first 4 days of the tournament. Plus, we'll talk about, is it a travel or not a travel? The gather step. LeBron James has changed how we look at traveling, right?
Yep, and flopping.
It's Gary and Matt with Jimmy on 1620 The Zone. All right, it never stops. Now it's crossover season for Evan Bland because spring football begins today. And he joins us now from the World Herald. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, crossover season indeed. Let's do it.
Hey, let's start with football. What would, because we saw in the first go around of the new playoff back in December, we talked about the Cinderellas, but we really didn't have one. In college football, what would a Cinderella look like in this day and age of the Power Two?
Well, I mean, it would come from outside the Power Two, I suppose, as rare as that is. I mean, SMU kind of was the closest thing we had to that. It felt like last year. That's kind of where it would start. It would have to be kind of a team that was put together without top level funding, a team that maybe had at this point it'd be a team that had players that you knew weren't going to be there next year because they were going to be on one of the Big Two's rosters, and that's kind of where it is. Like to relate this to college basketball, I'm looking at the brackets today, and who's the biggest underdog? It's Arkansas, like the team that paid one of the highest levels of NIL of anybody in the country. Like that's kind of what it is. So I don't know, man. I think Cinderellas are. It feels like midnight's sort of coming permanently for a lot of these programs that are part of the have-nots. And again, it's not because of the old hurdles of tradition and facilities. It's just because they don't have the money to keep up. And we're seeing it. We've seen it in the College World Series. We've seen it in we're seeing it right now in college basketball. We certainly saw it in football last fall as well. So I think it becomes rarer all the time. I think you're going to have these one-shot situations occasionally, maybe where a coach brings some players together and they get lucky with some development and some roster situations. But it feels to me like this is going to be more brand name stuff all the time. And that's probably what executives want. And that's probably what the casual fan tends to want and gravitates toward. But it does feel like the profile for these Cinderella teams is getting smaller and smaller. And it just feels like the hill's even steeper than what it's been in some ways.
Hey, so today starts a 5-week sprint to the Husker games, where Colorado and Syracuse might be beginning a process to actually play a joint game, a scrimmage, practices, whatever is being proposed. I know we've talked about how the spring game on who's doing it, who's not, how it's become a lightning rod and it's been a battle point. If this gets approved and Colorado and Syracuse have a game, do you think that has much impact on the schools that elected not to go through with a normal spring football game down the road?
I think it could. To me, I mean, everything in this kind of situation screams like, is this a moneymaker? Can this be a revenue generator? And if Colorado and Syracuse get approval to do that, and it happens, and it's something they could put on TV, and it makes each program X number of millions of dollars potentially, then yeah, I can see a lot of athletic directors' ears perking up and saying, how can we get in on that as we're trying to open up revenue streams and be competitive and all the rest? I think if not, then I don't see necessarily the motivation for the standard school to do it. I mean, if you're Nebraska and you're however many of these other Big Ten schools, and you don't want to play it right now anyway because you're afraid of getting your players poached or getting guys hurt when you're investing financially in them, then I don't see how a scrimmage changes that. I mean, it seems like you're going right back to the situation that you just put yourself in. And then, imagine the situation for whoever loses. Imagine Nebraska played, Louisville in a spring scrimmage and lost. Like, you're talking about just kind of killing your off-season momentum right there. There's going to be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, and you have to kind of work your way back from that, in addition to all the other things that we just laid out. So, yeah, I think if this can be something that could be valuable television inventory for an ESPN or something like that, then maybe this is something that schools are open to. Otherwise, I don't see necessarily the incentive for why they would do it.
Hey, let's talk about the quarterback, because he's now into his second spring. He'll be going into his second year as a starter. We'll see what the competition is behind him. But as we work our way through this 5 weeks and the evolution of the quarterback, now with a full offseason to work with an offensive coordinator that I think they're more in line with, what are some talking points or phrases that you will keep your ear out for from either coaches or teammates that tells you that Dylan is on the right path of maybe before kickoff in Arrowhead in August of this becoming his team?
Well, I mean, I think your first talking point, and it's probably going to come from Dylan, I'm guessing he'll talk Tuesday, but will be the body composition piece that Matt Rule opened the door for earlier this month. So where's he sitting physically? Is he down? He was listed at 230 last year. Rule made the comment about you can't be 240 pounds and excel. So is he down to, what does he want to be down to? 220, 215? I think that's an interesting starting point. How has he incorporated sort of that willingness to scramble a little bit more into what he's doing this off season? We kind of saw that in the second half of last year, but how do you continue on that track? I think the Holgerson piece is really interesting with Raiola and what that looks like over a full off season. So, maybe one area that you start with when you talk about kind of paring down the offense is, does Nebraska want to play with some more pace next season, right? Like if you're having your menu, so to speak, maybe you can move that thing a little bit faster. And so I'll be anxious to hear if the offense does much of that. Obviously, you get into how quickly Raiola can process things, and I think that's been a strength of his, just naturally. And then as a guy who studies film, and then I would say just the rapport with the skill guys too. I mean, we saw and heard from Dane Key about really him kind of laying out, maybe the main reason he came to Nebraska for his final season was Raiola, the kid who was with him throughout his official visit. So if they hit it off the field, what does that look like now when they're together on the field here for the next few weeks? Do they build that rapport? Same is true with Isaiah Hunter and Hurley Gilmore and Heinrich Harburg making the transition to tight end. Like so many different pass catchers where you can see the potential, but like how does that connection manifest in these next few weeks? I think that's something else as well, because the leadership piece it continues to grow. I think that's been pretty obvious from what we've heard from people. The arm talent's pretty clear. But I think those other pieces are kind of that thing that you look at for him to take that next step into year 2.
We've all done this long enough that when you're in the offseason, you talk more about the new guys than you talk about the returning guys. I brought up Keona Davis to someone the other day, just a reminder of, we were talking about him in December, but we really haven't talked about him much on a defensive line that there's a lot of open spots and snaps to go get. But something you said about wide receiver. So you bring in 3 guys. So you got Key, you've got Gilmore, who, Shorts wanted him to come with him. Then you add Hunter, who, looks the part. They're different wide receivers from this guy I'm going to bring up. What do you think, after a sample size of Dana getting to see Ja'Cory Barney, and now with wide receivers that don't all look the same? The thing I like about the wide receiver room is they can all fill different roles. What do you think Barney looks like in year 2 in this offense?
I mean, I think Barney could be a huge playmaker out of the slot, personally. Like, they were lining him up on the outside, some, I think, out of necessity a little bit last year, but like with his size, he's right around 6 foot, a little shorter maybe, his just electric change of direction ability, who can also beat a guy deep. Like that's to me somebody who could just wreak havoc in the middle of the field. I mean, you get that guy the ball in space 5 yards downfield, like there's going to be some yak there, I think. And he's going to be better suited for that because of the personnel you just mentioned around him. I mean, I was watching a bunch of film on Dane Key recently. Like he's a true, like, outside number 1 kind of guy. And you look what he did last year. This is not, Isaiah Hunter catching balls over overmatched FBS secondaries. Like this was a guy who was making hands catches in traffic against SEC secondaries consistently, and was finding holes in zones, and was getting past guys deep, and was high pointing 50-50 balls. Like that's somebody who, if he's doing now what he did then, like that takes some of the attention off a guy like Barney. I think that's, if you're Ja'Cory Barney, man, I think you're really excited about just what your role can be, because you're not going to be the focal point of opposing defenses, or at least not the sole focal point. So I think as big as his freshman year was, now he's got another year with Raiola. You have better skill players around you on the outside. Potentially your tight end room could be just as good or better than it was last year if Harburg comes along and Luke Lindenmeyer continues what he did in New York City. I think, Barney absolutely has that skill set to be somebody in the middle of the field who can be one of those game breakers that Dana Holgorsen type offenses really crave.
We saw how they want to use Harburg in the bowl game. Do you foresee Harburg being a guy that puts his hand in the dirt and blocks?
Yeah, I think so. Some, at least. I mean, he's got the ability to do it. He's like, I was just thinking the other day, it's been 2 years since the spring conversation began with Harburg about, hey, could he be an H-back? Is he going to move around a little bit? So, like, people have seen this in him for a long time. His offensive coordinator at the time, Marcus Satterfield, was saying, he wants him to smash into guys because he's that explosive and powerful and all the rest. So now that he's full-time tight end and you're not having to worry about, protecting your backup quarterback in case something happens to Dylan, I think they have full faith that he can go out and tangle, with a defensive lineman or an outside linebacker potentially. And if not, and if you don't want him to do that full time, you have a guy like Luke Lindenmeyer, who I think that's his specialty, really. I mean, we saw him make some catches in the Pinstripe Bowl too, but like that's a guy who I think embraces that role as sort of the blocker, enforcer, kind of doing the dirty work sort of thing. So if you can find situations to get both those guys on the field at the same time, I mean, Harburg in some ways is more like a receiver than a tight end too. So, we talked about body composition with Raiola. I think Harburg will be an interesting one to hear from as well. Now that he's full-time tight end, how much weight does he want to add? What does his body look like going into next season? I don't think he's going to be as big as a guy like Thomas Fidone was.
No.
But certainly his going all in on the position, I think, does change that conversation for what he can do. And I think he's got the clay to be a guy who can put his hand down and move some bodies.
Evan Bland of the World Herald joining us. Give me the best case scenario. And then let me preface this for people that know, offensive line, there are a lot of opportunities to get snaps in the spring because of the injuries and injuries to guys that are frontline guys. So give me the best case scenario with a guy like Sam Sledge, and maybe the worst case scenario or the uncomfortable scenario of Sam Sledge's spring.
Well, I mean, the best case scenario is a guy entering his third college season, embraces the position, or I mean, he already embraces it, but thrives as the center at a position Nebraska envisioned him playing and recruited him to play. And then you're able to build out the interior of your line from there. You can put Spindler at right guard, where he's been a starter for 2 years at Notre Dame. Justin Evans stays at left guard, where he's been very solid for Nebraska. And then you can figure out your tackles, Elijah Pritchett at one side, and then, Gunnar Gatula maybe, or whomever else maybe could rise, Grant Seagren, or one of the injured seniors in Teddy Prohaska or Turner Corcoran. I think that's what Nebraska would like to happen. I think that'd be the thing that'd be best for the line. If that doesn't happen, for whatever reason, then you have to look at your backup center options. And I think that's where it starts for Nebraska. Like, you start in the middle and you work your way out with that evaluation at that position. So if it's not Sledge, it's going to be either Evans or Spindler. And Evans was the number 2 behind Ben Scott the last couple of years, and so you could see that Spindler could do it. He mentioned that when he spoke with reporters a couple weeks ago, but you'd prefer him probably not to have to do that as a 1-year guy. And then if one of those guys is on the interior, then you need to find somebody else to be that other guy. Maybe that could be Lutusky, who has done it in the past, and he's going to be in the conversation, I think, regardless.
Yeah.
But to me, it's kind of a dual conversation where you've got your interior with the guards and the center. That's kind of one conversation, and I think that one can be resolved in the spring largely, with most of those guys healthy and having the chance to show what they can do. I think the tackle conversation is destined to play out into the summer and probably fall camp, where you don't know what you're going to have yet in Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran, and Elijah Pritchett's going to settle in and show what he can do, and Gunnar Gatula's out this spring, and he, I thought, showed well down the stretch last year. And you've got young guys like Grant Bricks, who they like long term too. So I think that's the part you're probably going to remain unsettled in through the spring. But if you feel confident in who your center is, and you can set that interior, I think that would be something Nebraska would consider progress here through the next couple months.
Hey, let's slip in a baseball one before we get you out of here. Is it getting late early with Nebraska baseball?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. And to me, like, the way I've kind of framed it is this is sort of their last RPI chance to get back into single digits here in the next week or so, where you've got Kansas State on Tuesday out there. That's a good Wildcats team. And then you've got a top 10 Oregon State team coming into town next weekend. Creighton after that. Those have all been top 50 RPI schools. And so if you can show well, then I think you can kind of continue the conversation with Nebraska's RPI. If you don't, if you're 500 or below, then I think you look at the rest of the schedule and you say it's going to be really difficult for Nebraska to make up enough RPI ground to get back into that top 40-ish range. Right? I think right now they're right around 120, somewhere in that area. And history tells you, man, if you get into April and beyond and you're in triple digits, and then you're in the Big Ten, it's really hard to get back into that situation. So to me, it's this next week. If they don't make a run, the conversation pretty quickly becomes, you got to make that 12-team Big Ten tournament first of all, and then you probably need to win it to get the automatic bid. This is the conversation they had in 22, which wasn't a ton of fun for fans, and a little bit in 23 as well. So they had the tough schedule in the non-con. It hasn't gone their way through ineffectiveness and injury and a couple other things. But to me, this is kind of that last gasp to maybe continue that at-large conversation. Otherwise, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and you come home from being out in California for 10 days, and you got to get on a bus and go to Manhattan. Going to be an interesting week. Evan, as always, we appreciate it. We'll see you later this week.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Gary.
That's Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald. Whatever you do in the next 2 weeks, this week is a big week. Just grab a lineup, stick with the lineup. Veterans that have been here before, let them either sink or swim, and then you move on. Yeah. Or the lineup pops. Guys know they're going to be in the lineup every day. It's not going to be lineup gymnastics, and go from there.
This is the group we're going with.
Well, and it's not even April yet, and they're a tough watch. I thought Saturday would be a turning point to win a game like that, where they get a big base hit in the top of the ninth, and then they have somebody Nebraska them in the bottom of the ninth with bad base running. But yesterday they come out and they're flat. And they just, again, the troubles of hitting with runners in scoring position, or you get runners on, and what happens? More than likely, you get first two guys on, you got second and third, you got no out. What's going to happen? The next three outs are going to be strikeouts or a little pop-up.
Oh, the Astros used to do that when I was a kid. I remember that in big games.
They're a tough watch, man. There was a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement. And so now it's kind of like the time of the year where people will start dialing in on baseball because the weather is warming up.
Yeah.
The schedule, they get more into a routine because they're going to be playing closer to home. Their run of playing teams from the old Pac-12 is over. But the season might be over. And this is the time of the year where people start paying more attention to baseball. But this year, people paid more attention earlier because there was momentum of last year, and there was some real belief that this was a regional host and a team that with a run could get to the College World Series. Now, you never factored in Mason McConaughey would be out for the year, or Timmerman would be out for some time. But you know what? There are veteran guys that are in the lineup that aren't doing their job on a consistent basis, and it is limiting them. They're just not a very smart baseball team right now. And it is late, early. All right, quick break, come back. Jacob Bigelow is going to join us. We'll talk hoops and more coming up in the next hour on Gary and Matt, 1620 The Zone. All right, Chris says, and we watch the hell out of Colorado Syracuse on ESPN, joint scrimmage in Boulder. Imagine it would be in Boulder. They're going through the process, so they've put in whatever paperwork needs to happen, and both sides are for it. It's a fresh idea. It's Dion thinking outside of the box. It's probably not for everybody, but Colorado is willing to do it, and Fran Brown jumped on it. Chris says in the Equitable Bank inbox, if they're going to have the nerve to cancel the Tennessee game because they need money, then they better damn well go get that money with a sold-out spring game against another team. Don't tell me you are broke one day and then pass on the money the next. This was about 2 years ago where this idea was floated. I don't think it was by Nebraska, but Rule may have been asked about it in his first spring here and didn't shoot it down because it wasn't necessarily it was more of the joint NFL type scrimmages or joint practices. You would play a team that you had no shot of playing during the regular season. Like I think we proposed Nebraska goes to Ames or Iowa State comes here. And so you get Nebraska and Iowa State. It just never got any traction, even though a lot of people talked about it. Credit to Dion. He took it and he ran with it. And this looks like it may get approved. They petitioned the NCAA to have this happen. It's a cool idea.
I hope it does. I want to
not
watch.
for everybody, but we'll watch. We'll watch. And you know that they will Colorado it up.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Mark
yes.
Jones will be on the play-by-play. They'll have celebrities on the sidelines.
They won't even cover Syracuse, which is ironic because most of their alums work for ESPN.
All right, Jacob Bigelow joins us in the last hour. We got lots of hoops to talk about. The portal is open.
He went to Seattle.
He ended up going to Seattle?
Yeah, it was suspenseful because the blizzard almost stopped it, but he was able to get in and had a long layoff in Phoenix. So I'm excited to hear all about it.
All right. Well, we're excited maybe to hear about the ending of Colorado State. My buddy Evan. This is the text I got at what time? 11:53 last night. That was easily the most heartbreaking loss, and we've had plenty of candidates of my life as a CSU fan. We'll talk to Jacob coming up next on 1620 The Zone. There is a. By the way, if you just want to follow all the guys that are going into the portal today,
verbal commits.
Yep. There's a guy from South Dakota that just entered the portal that I don't even recognize his name. I don't know that he played there this year.
Does he even play basketball? That'd be the first question.
Verbal Commits is the Twitter account to follow when it comes to portal activity. I just want everybody to know.
Refresh often.
Well, while we are wondering about Josh Dix, will he stay close to home? Iowa State, Creighton, or Nebraska? We are finally through that R.J. Davis, Hunter Dickinson, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Mark Sears, all will be out of eligibility.
They're going to have to get jobs.
Our fifth-year players are no longer going to be here.
Man, Kalkbrenner with those pipes be a natural at the zone.
All right, let's welcome in Jacob Bigelow. Why you did not stay for last night in Seattle?
No, I had to come back to work today, so unfortunately,
call in sick.
Not
be like my co-host, make something up.
Yeah,
like he did. That he's sick, so he called in sick.
Nah, I'd considered.
How expensive was that trip?
I had some flight credit laying around that needed to be used, so we made the most of that. No, we kept it pretty reasonable, honestly. I was impressed with myself.
That wasn't the question. Okay. So you were not there last night.
No.
Travel or no travel?
I mean, they're not going to call it.
Oh, come on!
In that situation, I think with my bias aside, I still call that a travel.
Because it was.
But, I mean, there's no situation where that's going to get called to end a game, especially on that stage, which is the reality of of college basketball right now. I mean, I don't know if there's any ref on God's green earth that is calling that in that situation. Unfortunately.
Well, have you seen that called in college basketball this year with somebody the size of Derek Queen?
Not particularly, no. I mean, someone tried to bring up to me, like, think about how many travels Andrew Morgan got called for this year, where he would try to like hit a spin move or something like that, and I'm just like, that's kind of similar, but I mean, there's people can talk all they want about, like, you know, is something killing the first round of the NCAA tournament, but there's the officiating thing that has been talked about all year. There were multiple instances in both the men's and women's tournament over these last couple of days where I'm just like, oh, this is just straight up bad. Like, this isn't like egregious. This isn't like, this isn't, a ref show. Like, it's just honestly just bad officiating. And there were a handful of games, I mean, a couple of games that were of interest to me where officiating played a direct role. And that was one of them yesterday. And, Maryland people will say, well, Nick Clifford elbowed Geronimo in the side of the head and he should have been ejected. And also, like, people think Colorado State was getting away with murder that entire game. And I just, like, it's, there's two sides to every coin. But, I mean, yeah, the officiating is still very much an issue in college basketball, both men's and women.
I want to focus on men because I think women's basketball officiating is not very good, and the product is so much better than what the officials are. But back to the men. There's going to be a heavy discussion in the offseason about reviews. Will there be coaches' challenges? We've had a lot of reviews that kill the momentum of the game. We don't need Gene Steratore popping in all the time. We just don't need him. Okay? But here's the thing I'll go back to, and we know the game has changed because the athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, and the officials are not getting bigger, stronger, faster. And they're not getting younger. But you have a game like St. John's, Arkansas, which I wouldn't even want to officiate because it's going to be physical and they're going to play volleyball on the glass. But my problem with that game was, because the refs became the main characters, is not everything is a foul. I think we've gotten to the point where every contact is a foul and we're going to blow our whistle. And I think it's really stunting the sport.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And that's, I can I'm sure people will point to games like that, and some of the. St. John's games all year, depending on who you ask, people would say it was, would be borderline unwatchable, and that the officiating would come into question, and that was a theme with St. John's all year. But that is definitely in multiple levels of college basketball, whether it's power conference, low major, mid major, all that. I would tend to agree with you. There's been, I don't want to call it like an overcorrection, but there's definitely been there's much. I'm on the same wavelength as you. More things, it's just contact or it's getting called fouls than ever before, I think.
And I'll look at that, and St. John's is a tough team to officiate because they're going to put their hands on you and they're going to be physical on the glass. Again, not everything is a foul, but you saw in the Omaha St. John's game, I think we were on a stretch for the most fouls called on rebounds in the history of college basketball. And then in the second half, they just let them play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's I feel like the biggest thing I saw officiating over regardless of calls, just like calls on rebounds, like you just mentioned, like calls on the floor, like either on shots or on rebounds. It felt like there was a lot of officials pointing at the ground when blowing whistles over the weekend.
All right, 4 days of basketball, 12-4 is the Big Ten. Your assessment of the Big Ten getting 4 to the Sweet 16. What kind of a weekend did they have, in your opinion?
I thought it was pretty solid. I think the team that lost before I expected them to was probably Wisconsin. That finish in Denver was they battled back, but BYU was just a machine. I think I saw a stat that they had probably one of the best shooting games in NCAA tournament history, both from the field and from three. They went nuclear, and that's going to be there was a lot. There was a lot of interesting tidbits to come out of the BYU stuff in Denver over the weekend, including their model and all that. But your question was about the Big Ten. Wisconsin, that was probably the most disappointing result overall. Illinois was they were hanging around with Kentucky, but I never really thought they were going to win that game. Kentucky had a talent advantage, age advantage, and a coaching advantage in that game. And then the 4 that you've got playing next weekend, Michigan, Michigan State. And Michigan State, Maryland, and who's the fourth?
Purdue.
Duh. Purdue. So those are, I think those were your 4 best teams in the league all year, regardless of results. And, they're carrying the torch for the conference going into the second weekend. And, that's a pretty good number. And, when you're going to start the tournament off 10-0, no conference had ever done that before. And when you've been hearing chirps for the better part of a decade about how your conference performs in the league, it's that's about all things considered, about all you could ask for from the Big Ten.
Hey, fair or foul, narratives are created in the postseason. I still don't think Matt Painter gets enough credit for what he's done at Purdue, because they always have. We lost to a 16 that'll be held against him, but then they turned around and made it to the final. But he's got 5 regular season championships. 6 of the last 8 years, he's been in the Sweet 16. They are back in the Sweet 16 this year. They get to play close to home in Indianapolis, but instead of playing at Gainbridge, that Sweet 16 Elite 8 is at Lucas Oil. So I hope the narrative on Painter is, man, this guy can coach, and I think smart people would put him in their top 20 of the best coaches in current college basketball. But sticking with the narrative part, because you brought up Wisconsin. Wisconsin had a year that none of us expected. They were much better. All of a sudden, they found some offense. They were supposed to fall apart when A.J. Storr and Chucky Hepburn left. All of a sudden, John Tonje shows up and almost breaks Frank Kaminsky's single-season scoring record, which is unbelievable. But they're out in the tournament early again. So how does Wisconsin shake the Greg Gard narrative that has divided their fan base? Because they like what they do in the regular season, but they're a program that is built on what they do in the postseason.
Yeah, that's an interesting discourse for sure. Because Wisconsin. Remember when Wisconsin and Nebraska were both picked 12th in the Big Ten preseason poll? They tied, and one of those teams, overachieved greatly, with what they were projected to do in Wisconsin. They get a 3 seed, but they're out in the first weekend. And we've talked at length about Nebraska and how their season went. But I mean, it's about the expectations that surround that program. There is kind of a Greg Gard and March thing that's been going on around there. And with this season's group, you've got to balance. You have to balance. Like the preseason expectations was probably a down year. You lost your two of your 3 best players. You overachieved greatly. You're in the Big Ten final. You are semifinal. Wasn't the final or the semifinal? And no, the final, right? Yeah. And they get the 3 seed, but they're still out early. That's a good question. You got to find the right balance of it, right? Because in a way, Greg Gard proved people wrong with changing the offense, going away from your father's Wisconsin basketball, the swaying play through the post, and going away from that, showing his ability to adapt. But it still produced a similar result in the postseason. So it's you got to find the right balance between the two.
All right, let's talk big picture on the tournament. Does it need a Cinderella, or we get monster leagues and matchups and we're okay?
I think the Cinderella thing is fun up until like yesterday. I think like if a Cinderella wins one game and you're playing for a trip to go to the Sweet 16, I think that's when that's where the line is drawn, because this is no slight to mid majors or anything like that, but usually when most of the time, I know 2 years ago Florida Atlantic and San Diego State were in the Final Four, but the majority of the time when those teams get to the second weekend, it kind of just gets ugly, and it's usually an eyesore, and it's kind of just on to the next one. And I think that the upside of a rather chalky tournament, and I don't think I'm not going to play into the questions about NIL and money and all of that, is I think it's been a top-heavy college basketball season, and so the cream is going to rise to the top when it matters most. And there's going to be some really fun matchups in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight next weekend. I think there were some good matchups this weekend. Gonzaga-Houston felt like it should have been an Elite Eight game, and it was in the second round. UConn-Florida felt like it should have been later in the tournament. There were some good games, and I think the brands and the matchups, especially in such a niche sport like college, it's still pretty niche, in a football centric, sports discourse in this country. Still rather niche, but I think you need the brands and you need the power matchups, and I think there's going to be plenty of that next, starting on Thursday.
Don't you think? And this was a good collection of mid majors that were in the tournament, but this was also a year where there wasn't much separation between the ones and the twos. The top of the field of 68 was pretty strong.
Yes.
Doesn't it? And I know because I talked to a couple of people about this. They talked about the ball. They talked about, the length, all that kind of stuff. But we didn't get good 3-point shooting. If you're going to be a Cinderella and make a run, usually you get on a heater hitting threes against a much higher seed. We just didn't get that in the first 2 days of the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Colorado State's a perfect example. They shot it really well from 3 against Memphis on Friday, and then they turn around and I think they finished I think they only made 5 threes against Maryland, and they still were, in it till the very end. They were 1 of 11 from 3 in the second half until Lake makes the one late that, felt like that could have been the game winner until what happened at the other end. But yeah, I definitely, and I mean, even the mid-major darling that you saw up close and in McNeese, they definitely were not making threes at a high clip. They were playing with their athleticism edge, trying to pound it inside, play through the post, mid-range, that sort of thing. But that's a good point. There has been talk about the ball. I saw Kobe Brea from Kentucky say that you have to change how you shoot because the balls are like brand new out of the box. They're overly inflated, and that's kind of been talked about a little bit the last couple of years. But I'm definitely right there with you. That's part of the Cinderella formula. You got to get going.
So I'm glad you brought up the balls, and there was the discussion about do you have 7 or 9 pounds in the ball? I don't know enough about that. I blew my load on the deflate gate, so I'm all over that stuff. But the ball is called a Wilson. I wrote this down. Wilson EVO.
NXT.
Yeah, NXT.
Yep.
Not everybody uses that during the season. A lot of the mid-major conferences and programs don't use that basketball. So the first time that they use that basketball is when they show up for their practice and then they show up for the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Nebraska made that their practice ball and game ball this year. I noticed it in like an off-season video. I'm like, hey, those are the tourney balls. And people are like, you're really sick in the head. I'm like, yeah, True. I got 4 eyes. I notice things like that. But yeah, that's definitely because Nike schools. I don't think Nike has a ball anymore. Nike had a ball for a few years and it was weird. There are still Adidas balls, and Under Armour, that sort of thing. I remember when I was a basketball manager. It was if Nebraska was going on the road to a Nike school, we had Nike balls. If they're going on the road to an Under Armour school, we had Under Armour balls the whole 9 yards. But yeah, no, there's definitely more schools now that are just going to the tourney ball during the season. But yeah, there's definitely some schools where it's a brand new ball, literally and figuratively, when it gets to the big dance.
Well, do you remember, because this always used to be the thing when you'd go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin would use cement balls. Like they would use a brand that nobody had ever heard of, but they were like bouncing cement. Did you encounter that?
I did, yeah. I think it was called The Rock. That was the brand they had for a couple of years. It was a ball that was just straight up called The Rock, and it bounced like a rock. As you were just talking about, it was definitely the most random ball of the two. But yeah, down on shout out to longtime Nebraska equipment manager Pat Norris down on his wall of basketballs. That was one that was on there
for sure. You talked about Darren DeVries last week. What is the Big Ten getting, and what does it do to the Big Ten coaching profile? Ben McCollum to Iowa, now official. More than likely, Nico Medved to Minnesota.
I think it raises it. I think all 3 additions are great for the conference. Going from Mike Woodson, Ben Johnson, and Fran McCaffrey to, ironically enough, the last 3 head coaches of Drake men's basketball, Ben McCollum, Darren DeVries, and Nico Medved, are all going to, Nico, that has not, come out yet. I mean, their season ended yesterday, but it seems like that's the consensus for how that's going to go. With Ben McCollum, I mean, he's a winner. I mean, I know you'll be talking Creighton when you talk to John Walker later this week, but he can give you some more good insight on Ben from their time at Northwest Missouri State. But everything I've heard about him, he's a gamer. He lives, breathes basketball. That's his focus. He's not going to get lost in any fishbowl or any media, anything like that. His focus is always on the game and on basketball, and he's a lifer. He loves that stuff, and I think that's an excellent hire for Iowa. It's going to be quite the change of pace going from Fran McCaffrey and going to how look at how Drake played this year, where they were at pace wise. But I mean, it's like and Jimmy, I'm not trying to disparage your pro team, but the way they play reminds me of kind of the prime Spurs. Like they're always looking for the right shot. The way they pass, the way they play offense, and that's been the McCollum way since Northwest Missouri State. I first watched him coach in Maryville, Missouri, a few years ago, and I was like, this is like prime Spurs stuff with how they pass and how the ball moves and how surgical it looks offensively. And then with Nico to Minnesota, like I mean, that's just I think that's exactly what Minnesota basketball needs. It's going to be an uphill battle, money wise, but I think that just him being the guy is going to have more people interested in possible financial support. He's an alum. He was a manager there, got into coaching there, Minnesota guy through and through. I think that's what that program needs. And I think he can, it's going to, in my opinion, feel eerily similar to, when Tim Miles first got to Nebraska, and he's going to have to, be sort of a salesman. He's going to have to do some grassroots, fundraising type stuff. But I think he's built that way. If you watched how they were running offense yesterday, it was good looking offense, good sets. They played tough, hard-nosed defense. I think those are both great hires for both of those programs, and I think it's good news for the Big Ten.
Man, I love watching Colorado State, how they pass, they cut. I mean, I think the X's and O's are going to I mean, they're going to be in a good spot in the Big Ten. Let's shift to Nebraska because Nebraska has they're still playing.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But the portal is open today. And whether we discuss an Owen Freeman or a Josh Dix and it's a tug of war between Creighton and Nebraska, whatever happens, do you think that Nebraska's leading scorer next year is currently on the roster, or are they currently on somebody else's roster?
That's a good question. I'm going to say it's probably someone who is on someone else's roster. The candidates for on Nebraska's roster would be Rink Mast, Connor Esesian, or Berke. So I'm going to go with someone else's roster just based on saying that out loud. Yeah, I'm going to say the leading scorer next season is likely currently on someone else's roster.
All right. And along those same lines, do you think, because we're attaching names to Nebraska and Nebraska's reached out, so you hear that there's contact, but is there general interest on both sides? But there's going to be a lot of local that'll be attached to both Creighton and Nebraska. From the Nebraska perspective, do you think Nebraska's top targets are still on somebody else's roster and not officially in the portal on day one?
That's kind of the sense I get. And I don't know, names directly. I'm not, but that's kind of the sense I get because it felt pretty quiet, on the Nebraska front for the last, not even in terms of just rumors are rumors, but there has been barely any talk really. I mean, there were a couple guys yesterday that, it felt like it might have just been their agents saying there was interest from Nebraska, because when you look at their film, look at their clips, you're like, this guy, I don't know what's jumping off the page here, but yeah, I feel like that's probably the case, and I feel like this cycle, I feel like there's going to be, like portal recruiting, I feel like all that's going to be kept close to the vest because of how much money is involved, and how the a bidding war or guys getting outbid could have be a result just of stuff leaking out. I feel like it's going to be kept pretty close to the vest this cycle.
I agree with you. Last year they tried to do that, and because they tried to reel in a prospect before others got onto him, but then that player's agents made a big deal about Nebraska, and then they added a couple other schools, and Nebraska lost them to a fellow Big Ten school.
Okay.
So I agree with you about trying to keep it quiet. We'll get you out on this. Matt Abdelmassih, you're a good friend. I saw him in Providence. He was wheeling and dealing, man. He is a 3 cell phone guy. He's got 3 cell phones, and of course he was the escort for Spike Lee before the St. John's Arkansas game. Was there equivalent of a Spike Lee that Matt Abdelmassih was an escort for in Lincoln?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I wasn't around the program when he was around. I just get to hear some stories secondhand. But yeah, that's what a moment in time, that crowd shot during the McNeese-Purdue game of Amir Khan, Spike Lee, and Matt Abdelmassih. What a moment in time that was for the national audience.
It won't happen, but couldn't Fred use Matt Abdelmassih more now than he did at the beginning of his career at Nebraska?
I would say so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, either Matt or someone in that similar ilk. I think that a lot has been made about the GMs and the college football ranks. Even here, locally with Nebraska, I think there's going to be an upward trend in GMs and college hoops too. A lot, because lost in the Will Wade NC State stuff is that he is going to have Andrew Slater as his GM, and Andrew Slater is he has had a very quick rise through the scouting ranks, spent the last couple of years with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but GMs in college basketball are going to be pretty prominent too. And I think Will Wade's NC State is going to make some noise in the ACC, whether the rest of that conference likes it or not.
Yeah, and so is hiring NBA assistants to be college head coaches. I think that's a trend we're going to see more of.
Absolutely.
Yep. Jacob, appreciate it. Thank you very much. There'll be a lot going on this week. When we talk next week, I expect a full preview of The Crown.
I don't know what it would take for a full Crown breakdown from me, but
who will be left? Who will be left? There's their guys are in the portal off the teams that are in the Crown today.
Yeah, I saw the Arizona State thing yesterday. That guy going into the portal, he clearly does not get the significance of the college basketball crown. But yeah, there will be plenty to talk about next week for sure. And I appreciate the time, like always, Gary.
Thank you, my
Welcome
friend.
back, and have a good rest of the week.
That's Jacob Bigelow.
That is shaping up to be a big dumpster fire at this rate of all these people jumping in the portal. Will they even have teams to compete in said tournament? Will games get canceled because some teams have been fleeced already? Oh, I can't wait. Crown fever.
Again, you have the portal open today, and there are 4 tournaments going on, and that's before the crown begins next week.
Yeah. Wow. Never mind. Who needs opening day when you have crown basketball to get excited for? I can't wait.
All right. Still to come before we put a wrap on it and get into the crossover. George Foreman.
Yeah.
Who lived a life's buffet, passed away over the weekend. And Danny Hurley, his team will not be playing anymore this year. And why I still love the man. It's to come with Aaron, Matt, and Jimmy in 1620 The Zone.
Still hungry for round 3? It's the Omaha Food Fight presented by Union Bank and Trust. The Savory 16 is underway. The field will once again cut in half as third round voting ends this Wednesday, the 26th. Then the Edible 8. Wait, what kind of edible? Featuring the 8 remaining contestants will then run from Thursday, March 27th until the end of the weekend. Vote now at 1620thezone.com for your favorite restaurant and see if they advance to the, ready for it, Foodie 4.
Nice. You have many people in your life that you love, but they're a bad loser?
Yeah, me. I don't like losing.
I can't quit Danny Hurley. So I was impressed by Connecticut yesterday.
I love what he told the Baylor.
Well,
the refs didn't do that. Duke did.
And the refs had no, I mean, come on. They didn't lose that game. They lost that game because they forgot about Clayton.
Yeah.
But if UConn had played that kind of defense all season long, they probably would have been a number 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
This year was a grind. But there's something about Danny Hurley that he wins, okay? There's all the other stuff you have to put up with. But it is pretty clear that anybody that knows him away from the floor, they say that is when the lights come on, there is something that flips. And then away from the floor, he's like a normal human being. But on the floor, he is a bad loser. He is a whiner, but the man wins, okay? He wins basketball games, and they almost upset and ruined everybody's bracket yesterday by almost pulling an upset. But they need to do a study on him. And this is just the makeup of Danny Hurley. Again, I would hire him if I'm an athletic director because he wins. I know what I'm getting, okay? He's not for everybody. He's probably not the easiest person to work for. He's probably not the easiest coach to play for. But at the end of the day, the man wins. And isn't that the goal, is to win?
Mm-hmm.
You got to put up with the other stuff. But they need to do a study on him. And I love that Ian Eagle, by the way, said he is a walking meme. How does a guy go from just being completely outraged at the refs, and he is a madman, his eyes, his words, his actions, and then like that, he is
Hi, I'm Dan.
He is doing an interview, and he is like a normal human being. It flips immediately. He did that yesterday in the game against Florida, and I'm like, we got to do a study.
He does fascinate the crap out of me for that exact reason. He reminds me of Hulk Hogan as Thunderlips. He's maniac in the ring. He's going to kill Rocky, and then afterwards he's like, that's the name of the game. What? Yeah. And that's kind of what I think of. A little bit of a pro wrestling thing to Dan Hurley. And you see that, and it's not even, I know what you're talking about. It's not just after the game, because that's a given when he's away from that. It's during the in-game interview. I'm like, whoa, charming, engaging, funny, having a good time with the game.
So, during the game yesterday, and then he's ruthlessly getting crushed, and he should, because the refs didn't cost him that game.
I never even thought that.
It was almost like he was in character when he was coming through the tunnel and what he said to the Baylor players.
Yeah.
But then look at, my God, I'm like, there's a guy I like, all of a sudden now has a human side when he's doing an interview and he's kind of tearing up. And then his post-game presser was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like his ass beatings of the last couple of years, which have been rather few, his post-game press conferences are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now there'll be one or two where he's being Danny Hurley out on the basketball court, not Danny Hurley behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But for a guy that is such a bad loser, I love him because he wins. He wins. I would hire him.
Mm-hmm.
The guy at the end of the day wins. You have to put up with that stuff. And I think if you go to play for him or if you coach for him, you know it. Not easy, but you're going to win. And you get the benefits of winning, whether it be to bump to the NBA or to go get another job. Now, he doesn't have an extensive coaching tree, and he kind of has kept most of his assistants with him.
Yeah, which that also says something. I mean, it can't be that bad if these guys stay with him.
He's one of the most fascinating characters in sports, by far in college athletics, of trying to diagnose who this guy is, because he's also one of these guys, and we saw it at Creighton after his incident last year. And I saw this Thursday night, and then it happened again on Saturday in Providence. You know that you have made it as a college basketball coach, and I'm going to even say a college football coach, because we did this with Dion when Colorado was in Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
When there is an anticipation in the building or in the stadium
for
the coach to come out, like,
isn't that like the old days?
It was when coaches were bigger than the program.
Like the Big Eight, everybody.
But Thursday night, so the Arkansas KU game played before Omaha, and everybody was waiting. Like the teams had come onto the floor, and they were warming up, and all the assistants had come out of the locker room, and even the assistants had started to shake hands, but Calipari and Self had not come out yet. And everybody in the building was staring at these two tunnels to watch Coach Cal and Bill Self to come out. They did the same thing for Pitino and Calipari. You know when you've made it. We do the same thing with Danny Hurley right here in Omaha. You know, UConn runs onto the floor. Oh, there's McNeely. Yeah. I wonder if his mom is here. There's Caravan. But then everybody just waits.
Here he comes. Here he
comes.
Because,
you know, the head coach doesn't walk out with his assistants in basketball. The assistants come out first, and then the coach is usually the last one, and they walk through, they shake hands, and then boom, we're ready to go. Mm-hmm. Now it's starting lineups, national anthem, boom. We do the same thing with Hurley here in Omaha.
Yep.
This past year when they played here, and there was, you know, the place was on tilt already, but it was like the anticipation was building for him to walk out of the tunnel.
I think he loves it too. I'm talking about here. He's like, hey, those guys are great.
I think he loves it, period.
Yeah.
He feeds into it. I don't know what it's like in stores or in Hartford, what it's like when he comes on the floor. I'm sure people go nuts. But on the road, there's this silent anticipation. You know you've made it as a coach when people are awaiting that for you to walk out of the locker room.
Blue chips when Bob Knight walks out?
Yes. Maybe the only exception would be on a different way is when in Providence, they wait for Cooley to come out for Georgetown because they want a piece of him. They miss him so bad in Providence, but they can't say it out loud because he is enemy number one there.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. When it comes to players, somebody used to tell me this when I was younger, and you'll love this. Bill Laimbeer. On the court, everybody remembers Bill Laimbeer.
Yeah.
And everyone said off the court, actually really great guy. About one of the nicest people, would give you the shirt off his back. You wait, you're the same guy that you're really nice. The second thing, you and I both know because we've called multiple games in Allen. Everybody waits for Bill Self to walk out. Yeah. And he walks out. The assistants come out. And this goes back to when I first started school there and Roy was the coach. He comes out, he blows the air in the hands, and it's just this big buildup. And that's the thing on the screen. And when you say that, that's exactly what I think of, at least on the home side. Now, on the visiting side, we just don't get as much of that anymore. And that's another reason why I like Dan Hurley, because you need that. But then you told a story a couple weeks ago about, Mac has said, hey, he's actually a great guy. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, all I can think about is I see him going ballistic on the sideline. And then I'm picturing, oh, watch he and Mac playing golf on a perfect day in June here in Omaha, just having a good old time, relaxing and enjoying each other's company. And it's like, I can't wait. There's a contrast. So yes, I am very fascinated by this man as well, but the dude wins at the end of the day. Now, if he were to ever stop winning, then it might be different, but I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to keep that thing rolling there to some, and that's great for Creighton fans because they'll have somebody to hate as an enemy. And we need enemies. It's about that. We used to have that in this.
We used to also have coach on coach crime. So that's why it was rare for Calipari and Pitino to be such built up, because we have rare moments of it's coach against coach. And it's not because they have mutual respect. It's because they have had incidents in their coaching career.
Oh, John Chaney, rest in peace.
We used to have that a lot more, where the coaches would not be as buddy-buddy. They wouldn't be hanging out in the summer on the Adidas circuit or, going on trips for Adidas. They would actually hate each other. We used to have that.
Yeah.
That's why Saturday in Providence was so rare that you had Pitino against Calipari. I mean, that was the whole buildup. Even on the practice day in the media, that's all anybody wanted to talk about. I think Pitino probably got more questions about potential matchup against Coach Cal than he did about Omaha.
Yeah. And then you find out Saturday, they're not actually that close. They have a mutual respect for one another. They'll watch stuff to see some of the stuff they run to kind of compare notes and stuff. Yeah, but they're not as BFF as people think.
The other thing about March Madness, what it does is Hurley is a walking meme. It also creates characters, whether it be Amir Khan, who is the student manager of McNeese State, who, if you see it in person, it is a show. People want their picture with him. They want his autograph. He's got a 6-figure deal as a manager, and he's going to be a GA at North Carolina State. So that's what March Madness does. They create characters. College Sports Only went through and went back and researched, because did you remember the Ram boy, the Colorado State fan that dressed in the Ram costume?
I actually expected Jacob to be dressed like that at the game the other day, but
so he was back the other night. He is now
a man.
Ram man.
Yeah.
He is still wearing the outfit, but he has grown up.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Villanova band member that was playing the piccolo? Do you know that she is now an optometrist?
Oh.
The Sad Kentucky Girl that they showed in 2024 last year after Kentucky got beat by Oakland. She is a community worker.
This is a great list. I love them. I'm thinking of all our favorite meme kids.
They found the crying Utah State cheerleader from 2 years ago. She is an influencer.
Oh, of course she is.
There was a kid in 2015 on that great run by Wisconsin dressed as a Teletubby badger. He is now a teacher. They found him. He is an elementary school teacher.
Oh, perfect. Kids like that kind of thing.
And then you were there. You remember in 2011, there was a crying Kansas fan that was dressed basically in the Jayhawk outfit.
Yeah. He just completed his time at KU as a center.
He is now the director of congregational learning at Temple Jeremiah in Chicago.
Oh, okay. He's not Hunter Dickinson. Wow.
No.
I wonder if he ended up going to KU when he got older. He'd be mid-20s now.
Yeah.
I watched that at Brewski's in Lincoln.
So
that's random.
Jim Phillips, who was the athletic director at Northwestern at the time, you remember his kid that was crying.
Mm-hmm.
That was this is what, 7, 8 years ago?
Something like that, yeah.
John is now a junior at Harvard. That was in 2017.
Oh. So he's smart. Okay.
March Madness creates characters.
I love it. I'm glad they found this because I always think about my favorite March Madness. Or you see something in one shiny moment.
There's going to be in 18 years, there's going to be another one of these of Where is Tommy Ashworth?
Yeah.
Who got a lot of run in the 2 days that Creighton was in the tournament.
The answer will be he'll be a freshman at Creighton. Coaching or playing for his dad.
There's also a little controversy. The Tennessee fan that looked like she was holding a newborn that had the headphones on because of the noise, but the kid was sleeping. John Rothstein, livid.
Oh.
Because the kid was sleeping in March because we don't sleep till May.
How do you know the kid wasn't listening to Westwood One? How do you know the kid wasn't listening to the Black Album by Metallica? We don't know this. They don't know they were asleep.
Would Creighton fans be upset if their one spot in one shining moment was Stephen Ashworth's son?
They shouldn't be. It's a wholesome moment. Kid was getting into it Thursday.
How does he not have NIL deals?
Yeah.
How does Sister Jean not have NIL deals? What do you think her loot would have been? If there would have been NIL
figures?
Back in the day when Loyola was making their run to the Final Four.
Yeah, the Archdiocese could do something a little.
If a manager at McNeese State can get 6 figures, what could a nun who is now 104 get?
Yeah. Also, Jacob, you were doing it wrong. Come on. This should have been you 10 years ago.
That's
Are
true.
you kidding? We could have. Oh, man, imagine that. In San Antonio, here comes Jacob with a boombox at the AT&T Center. This is an alternate reality. There was a show in the 90s called Sliders that had something like this. And Jacob helps lead Nebraska to win because they're so fired up. Tim Miles doesn't get ejected. KP gets his victory, and they move on to round 2.
We'll take a quick break and come back and put a wrap on the show. On a Monday, the portal is open.
Are you in it?
It is very, very active. A lot of interesting names here. Not any my names.
Yet. It is early.
But Nebraska is attached. Now their latest is to IPFW, Purdue Fort Wayne, Jalen Jackson.
Not an IPA.
First team All-Horizon point guard. Going to be a rough day for mid-major programs. Not only are they not in the Sweet 16, they're losing players right and left.
Hey, but there's more spots in the NIT.
Or the CBI in Daytona Beach. Or the Crown next week.
Oh, yes, I forget about that still.
We're back with more after this. All right, George Foreman passed away over the weekend. What a showman, in the ring, out of the ring. Sold over 100 million grills.
I bought one.
Do you think, and some of us a little bit older remember both of his careers, his comeback.
Watched him beat Michael Moore when I was about 11.
He is part of one of the most iconic calls in the history of sports. Down goes Frazier.
Yeah.
With Howard Cosell, which, quick story here. Kent Pavelka, when he was the voice of the Husker football, used to allow journalists. He'd bring journalists into the booth for the spring game, and he'd let them call a couple of plays. Ken Hamilton, who is since retired from the Lincoln Journal-Star, Tommy Frazier was the quarterback. And you can imagine.
Oh.
So Ken goes, down goes Frazier. And Kent lost it. He's like, you can't say that. People think that Frazier got hurt.
He's back up, everybody. He's okay.
But how many people know George Foreman from his grill more than they know him as a boxer?
The younger you get, the more. I still think of him as the boxer, but my generation's kind of the tail end, because that Foreman grill came out around the time high school, college, and yeah, I say I have one. Hell, that thing got a lot of run when I was a single 20-something-year-old working in radio, and hell yes. So
I cooked everything on my Foreman.
Exactly.
It did not matter.
It had a bun warmer too.
Yeah, it did not matter. I cooked everything imaginable on the Foreman grill.
And I think bun warmer would warm it nicely to put the broth in there.
I think somewhere in my house, I have my original Foreman grill. Now, I may not have cleaned it the last time I used it, and that might be like 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah, my wife had me throw mine out when we got together.
Do people still use them? I don't see them on, like, if you go to somebody's house and you're like in the kitchen, and you're like, like Snoopy and, but no, everything. When I first got that, everything went on the Foreman grill. He sold 100 million of them. He lived one hell of a life. I mean, I said this, I used this phrase earlier. He had every dish of the buffet of life.
Mm-hmm.
As a boxer.
And early George is fascinating. A lot of people don't know about early George and how he was, how he's portrayed, how he was thought of.
Yes.
They think of big, lovable, big George, give him a hug.
He wasn't that at the beginning of his career.
No, people actually feared for Muhammad Ali when they fought the rope-a-dope fight. I mean, and then they had the movie about George a couple years ago people, I want to go back and watch that. That's that's big George. You think he's kind of going to live forever? And
well, it was also, now it's changed with boxing, is you don't know who the heavyweight is.
Yeah. And
the heavyweight is not as recognizable in the United States, or as thought of like when boxing was at its peak, where boxers became pitchmen.
It was the standard. They were larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
Like big time boxing. I went to a big fight, 93. You never see that now. I saw, and it's not heavyweight, but I saw Pernell Whitaker fight Julio Cesar Chavez, no relation. I've had more money at the Alamo Dome then. And it was just something to build up about a fight. Now, when it came to the heavyweights, it was larger than life. Think of Mike Tyson, and this was the norm in his prime. So when George knocked out Michael Moore, who was pretty damn good too, I still remember Lampley's call on that, because that's how we were all feeling. Whoa, George is doing that at 45. I'm 42 right now, and I hurt my back the other day just sneezing.
His impact in and out of the ring, you don't see that now with boxers. But boxing is thought of differently in this country nowadays. Mm-hmm. All right, that'll do it for the show. Good show, everybody, on a Monday.
Good to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, basketball season is over. Now I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Baseball's coming.
Except watch, opening day on Thursday. Miles Barnstable from St. Thomas, who is, again, an all-conference guy, is in the portal.
Not even 10 o'clock yet.
James said, still use our 20-year-old Foreman grill.
Hell yeah.
Breakfast burritos, quesadillas.
Grilled cheese.
All right. Crossover's coming up next. Thanks, Jimmy. Matt will be back tomorrow for more of Gary and Matt. We'll see you at 6 on Tuesday.